This video continues with 25. Chapter 25, Side Effects. Reborn in the Boys with a Plunder System. My target is Homelander. 25, Chapter 25, Side Effects. The sun was a brilliant slash of gold on the horizon, painting the skyscrapers of Manhattan in morning light. But in the soundproofed sanctuary of my private training room, it was still the dead of night. I stood in the center of the padded room, the air still and cool against my skin. The power thrumming beneath my flesh was a tempestuous ocean, an entity so vast it felt alien, and yet it was as much a part of me as my own heartbeat. My previous self, the man who had woken up in this world what felt like a lifetime ago, was now a faded photograph. "Morning, boss," the system's voice chirped in my head, its cheerfulness a comical contrast to the lethal potential I now possessed. "Sleep well? Or were you up all night dreaming of all the glorious XP you get to spend?" Because I was. It was beautiful, a waterfall of pure data. "There's no time for sleep," I murmured, rolling my shoulders. The movement felt different, imbued with a sense of effortless force. "It's time for a power diagnostic." My super strength was now Tier 1. I walked over to a custom-made leg press machine in the corner, a monolithic piece of equipment built from tungsten and carbon fiber, designed for soup-level strength training. The weight stack was a column of dense plates that went up to 20 tons. I loaded it to the maximum, lay down on the sled, placed my feet on the platform, and pushed. With a whisper of hydraulics, the 20 tons of metal moved with the ease of a child's toy. It was like pushing an empty shopping cart. The thought slid into my mind, I could have pushed the entire building over if I'd had the leverage. This was Homelander's strength. Next, super defense. I retrieved the Spectre pistol from my inventory, its polymer frame cool in my hand. I had no way to test myself against a nuke just yet, but you had to start somewhere. I held the pistol to my forearm, the muzzle pressing against the skin. Boss, are you sure about this?" the system asked, a rare note of synthetic concern in its voice. "I mean, I'm pretty sure the warranty covers catastrophic hardware failure, but still. Might want to start with a Nerf gun first, just to be safe." Ignoring it, I pulled the trigger. The suppressed thump was loud in the silent room. The .45 ACP round struck my skin and flattened instantly, pancaking into a deformed disc of lead and copper that dropped to the floor with a harmless tink. There was no pain, no mark, not even a flicker of redness. I then tried my carbon fiber knife, a blade so sharp it could sever Kevlar fibers on a molecular level. It skittered uselessly across my skin, the sound like a fingernail on glass, unable to find purchase. Getting frustrated with its impotence, I focused my new strength, pressing the impossibly sharp edge against the center of my palm and pushing. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, with a sickening crack, the blade snapped in half. Satisfied, I moved on to the more exotic abilities. Fire manipulation. I held out my hand, palm up. I needed an external source to command. I retrieved a simple Zippo lighter from my inventory, its familiar metallic click echoing in the gym. I sparked a small flame. I focused my will on that flickering point of heat. The flame detached from the wick, lifting into the air to hover above my palm like a miniature sun. It writhed and danced at my mental command, an obedient creature of pure energy. I made it expand into a roaring ball of fire the size of my head, yet my skin felt nothing but a pleasant warmth. I compressed it, squeezing the energy down until it became a white-hot lance of plasma, thin as a needle and humming with power, sharp enough to cut steel. I turned my attention to the 20-ton weight stack from the leg press. I lifted my hand, reaching out with my mind. A low, groaning sound of protesting metal filled the room as the entire stack lifted a foot into the air, trembling under the strain. I pushed harder, but it wouldn't budge. The 10-ton limit of the Tier 3 power was a hard ceiling, but it was real. I could move small sections of mountains. Then, the next ability. This was the one that worried me. The patient I had taken it from at Sage Grove was a phaser, not a true teleporter. There could be flaws. Huey's brief stint with the power had left him naked, a walking punchline. The last thing I needed was to pop into a Vought board meeting in my boxers. "System," I asked, the words spoken aloud. "What are the parameters of this power? Are there any side effects I should be aware of?" "Side effects? Boss, you wound me?" The system replied, feigning offense. "Do you really think I'd give you a beta test version of a power? When you plunder an ability, I optimize it. I'm like a master software engineer. I take their unstable coded mess, I debug it, patch the security holes, and give you the gold master version too. The interface shimmered into existence before my eyes, showing a side-by-side comparison. On one side was a file for Sage Grove Patient 1138, with flashing red notes like uncontrolled spatial jumps, matter integration risk, and causes explosive diarrhea. Okay, maybe not that last one. On the other side was my version of the power, stamped with a big green stable. Their powers come from an unstable source. Compound V, the system explained, its tone shifting into a lecturer's cadence. It's like running a high-end graphics program on a computer riddled with viruses. It might work, but it's gonna be slow, it's gonna crash, and it might even fry your motherboard. I purify the power, strip out all the Compound V garbage, and integrate the pure concept of the ability directly into your being. So no, you will not end up naked or fused halfway into a wall. I have standards. All right, I said, a new wave of confidence washing over me. Let's try it. I focused on the far side of the massive gym, 100 feet away. I visualized the destination, the specific spot on the padded floor, down to the scuff marks. Then I activated the power. The world simply changed. One instant, I was standing by the leg press. Next, I was on the other side of the room. My clothes were still on. My stomach was still where it should be. It was a seamless transition. See, clean as a whistle. You've got 100-meter range with that thing now, by the way. Instant transmission. Very cool. A quiet satisfaction settled over me. I let the interface displaying my full list of powers shimmer before my eyes. Each one was a formidable weapon. Super strength, regeneration, cryokinesis. But as I reviewed them, one stood out as glaringly redundant. Carbon skin, a tier 3 power that granted me indestructible skin. It was the power I had risked so much to intercept from the boys, the entire reason for my elaborate shadow play with Huey and Translucent. But now, it was useless. Utterly, completely useless. My tier 1 super defense made my entire body, inside and out, from my bones to my eyeballs, functionally indestructible. Carbon skin was like putting a cheap padlock on the main gate of a nuclear bunker. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 26, chapter 26, breakfast. System, I asked, can I get rid of a power? Get rid of it? Boss, you can recycle it. Any power you possess can be converted into XP at its current tier value at any time. It's the ultimate trade-in program. Recycle carbon skin. Are you sure you want to convert carbon skin tier 3 into 1,500 experience points? Confirm. Conversion complete, you have gained 1,500 XP. Current XP, 2,500. The shimmery feeling of the carbon skin vanished, leaving only the absolute solidity of my tier 1 durability. I had 2,500 XP, enough for another significant upgrade. Upgrade teleportation. Power selected, teleportation tier 4. Upgrading to tier 3 requires 1,500 XP. Current XP, 2,500. Do you wish to proceed? Confirm. Deducting 1,500 XP. Upgrade complete. Teleportation is now tier 3. Note, maximum teleportation range has been increased to 1 kilometer. User can now perform multiple consecutive jumps with reduced mental strain. Current XP, 1,000. I tested it again, this time jumping from one end of the gym to the other and back again in the blink of an eye. The process was even smoother, the mental calculation required to lock onto a destination almost instantaneous. My ability to appear and disappear had just increased tenfold. I stood in the center of the room, feeling the hum of my upgraded powers. I was a walking arsenal, a one-man army with the power of a god and the skills of a master assassin. And I was also starving. The sun was fully up now, and the long night had taken its toll. I went to the kitchen and prepared a simple breakfast, eggs, toast, and a fresh pot of coffee. I also prepared a second tray, a more traditional Japanese breakfast of grilled fish, rice, and miso soup. My most delicate and unpredictable new asset would be awake by now. I carried the tray to her guest room. The door was still closed. I balanced the tray in one hand and knocked softly. "Kimiko," I called out in Japanese, "I have brought you breakfast. May I come in?" There was no response. After a moment, I opened the door a crack and peered inside. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made. The sketchbook I had left her was sitting on the nightstand. For a moment, I thought she had somehow escaped. Then I heard the soft sound of the shower, running in the ensuite bathroom. I let out a quiet sigh of relief. This was a good sign. She was using the facilities, making herself at home. It was a world away from the feral creature I had brought here. I stepped inside the room to place the breakfast tray on a small table. Just as I did, the bathroom door opened. She stepped out wrapped in one of the white towels. Her black hair was wet and slicked back from her face while droplets of water glistened on her shoulders. She had been so fierce in the basement, but now she just looked young. The feral light in her eyes was gone, and a deep watchfulness replaced it. She froze when she saw me, her hand clutching the towel tighter. Her eyes widened with a sudden jolt of surprise and vulnerability. My own brain short-circuited for a second. I was so used to seeing her as a tactical problem to be solved, that the sudden image of her as just a woman caught in a moment of privacy was disarming. "Sorry," I blurted out, the Japanese words clumsy. "I was just bringing breakfast. I didn't know." I averted my eyes, and my cheeks felt strangely warm. It was a completely alien reaction for me, and a flicker of my more human self. She didn't say anything. She just stood there as a statue of startled dignity. The silence in the room was awkward. I'll come back," I stammered, turning around and practically fleeing the room. I closed the door behind me and stood in the hallway, my heart beating a little faster than it should. "Well, that was smooth." The system's voice was dripping with sarcasm. "Real master of social interaction, you are. Walked in on the traumatized, mute super soldier while she was in a towel. I'm sure that did wonders for the trust-building process." "Shut up," I said, a genuine wave of embarrassment washing over me. I had faced down a Tier 2 powerhouse without flinching, but a simple social encounter had turned me into a stammering idiot. I waited in the hallway for 5 minutes, giving her time. As I raised my hand to knock a second time, the door swung open silently. She stood there, dressed in clean sweatpants and a t-shirt. Her wet hair was combed back, and her expression was once again a mask of guarded neutrality. She looked at the trays in my hands, then stepped aside, a clear invitation to enter. I walked in and set her tray down on the small table. I then retrieved a second chair from the corner and placed it opposite hers and set my own tray down. It was a clear gesture that I am eating with you rather than just serving you. She sat down with careful focus, and I sat opposite her. We ate, and it was the most awkward breakfast of my life. I was trying to project an aura of normalcy while sitting across from a living weapon who probably still wasn't sure if she should kill me or trust me. I decided to try and break the tension. My public persona as the friendly Aryan Spencer was a tool I hadn't used in a while, but it was worth a shot. I picked up a piece of my toast that had been cut into a triangle. I held it up while pretending it was a shark's fin and swam it through the air towards my coffee cup with a dun-dun, dun-dun. I did the stupidest thing since I arrived in this world. The act was childish, and it was a terrible joke. I executed the plan poorly, and I felt like an idiot. Wow. The system's voice was flat with second-hand embarrassment. That was physically painful to watch. Please never do that again. I prepared to put the toast down in defeat, but I heard a sound from across the table. It was a soft little noise. I looked up. Kimiko stared at me, and she covered her mouth with her hand. Her shoulders were shaking. It took me a second to realize what was happening. She was laughing. It was a suppressed giggle, a sound of pure amusement that she tried to hold back, but she failed. Her eyes crinkled at the corners. I had only seen rage or suspicion in those eyes before. A genuine smile spread across my face. I failed as a comedian, but I succeeded at something better. I made her laugh. This victory felt more important than the joke. She picked up a small piece of her grilled fish with her chopsticks. She held the fish up and mimicked my shark fin motion, her eyes sparkling with a shared joke. We finished breakfast in a new kind of silence. The silence was not awkward, and it felt comfortable. It was comfortable. It was the quiet understanding between two people who had found a tiny island of normalcy in a world of chaos. The bridge of trust between us was still fragile. It was a single thread spanning a vast canyon of trauma and suspicion. Goal: 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library: add to your library for updates. 27, Chapter 27, Vought 1. The first report came in at 6:17 a.m. It was from a frantic 911 call made by a local volunteer firefighter in rural Pennsylvania. He was reporting an uncontrolled blaze at the site of the psychiatric facility. By the time the first fire trucks arrived, the main building was already a lost cause, an inferno burning with a terrifying intensity. By 7:30 a.m., the incident was on Mr. Graves's desk. The word Sage Grove on the report sent a jolt of ice through his veins. He made a single call, and within minutes Vought's corporate machine roared to life. A fleet of unmarked helicopters lifted off from Vought Tower, their rotors churning the morning air. They were carrying Vought's elite risk assessment and recovery teams, the same people who had handled the Soup Party massacre. The scene that greeted them upon arrival was one of absolute devastation. The local fire department had been ordered to stand down and form a perimeter, their hoses useless against the thermite-fueled blaze that was still hot enough to melt steel. The main asylum building was a skeletal ruin, its roof collapsed, its walls blackened and crumbling. An acrid plume of smoke billowed into the morning sky, a funeral pyre for one of Vought's darkest secrets. Graves stepped out of his helicopter, the heat of the dying fire a physical wave against his face. His expression was grim. "Get me a perimeter," he commanded, his voice sharp over the roar of the helicopter. "No one in or out. Lock this entire area down. I want our people on the ground now." The Vought teams moved in. Their initial findings were a catalog of horrors. The fire had been impossibly hot, but it hadn't been uniform. It seemed to have originated from a single point in the sublevel, the location of Dr. Cardosa's laboratory. "Sir," Dr. Evans reported, her voice tinny over the comms, "we're finding bodies, or what's left of them. The fire was so intense, most were just fused carbon. Dental records will be impossible. We'll have to rely on DNA fragments if we can even find any that aren't completely denatured." They found the remains of the security staff in the control room, their bodies burned beyond recognition, slumped in the melted plastic of their chairs. They found the charred outlines of the nurses and orderlies at their stations. But it was in the patient wings that the true nature of the scene began to reveal itself. "Graves, you need to see this," Dr. Evans's voice crackled. He found her in the East Wing, standing over a body that was miraculously intact. It was encased in a semi-translucent block of ice that had somehow survived the inferno. The intense heat of the thermite fire had melted the outer layers, but the core remained frozen solid. Inside the icy tomb, the dead face of Lamplighter was clearly visible. "He was frozen solid before the fire," Evans said, her voice a mixture of awe and horror. "The ice acted as an insulator. It saved the body from the worst of the blaze." The discoveries continued. In a reinforced solitary cell, they found the shattered remains of another block of ice, and within it, the half-burned corpse of Cindy. In another wing, they found what was left of Sam Riordan's padded cell. The walls were scorched, but the floor was a mess of melted and refrozen ice. And in the center of the room, they found him. Sam Riordan's body was a grotesque sculpture of fire and ice. He had been flash-frozen, but the subsequent inferno had melted parts of him, creating a horrifying corpse. "It's the same," Graves murmured, a sickening sense of déjà vu washing over him. "It's the same as the Soup Party." The parallels were undeniable. A mass casualty event, a sophisticated method of incapacitation, and an unknown perpetrator or group with a terrifyingly diverse and powerful set of abilities. The microscopic puncture wounds at the hotel, the flash freezing here were methods of a silent killer. The final reports from the other teams were the nails in the coffin. The sub-level lab had been systematically looted. Every vial of Compound V was gone. Every piece of expensive research equipment had vanished. And the central server? Its hard drives had been physically melted by the thermite charge, leaving nothing but a slag heap of useless metal. The emergency meeting was held in a place few people even knew existed. At Stan Edgar's private office on the 99th floor, a cavernous space with a massive window that looked down on the entire city. Stan Edgar sat behind his desk, a quiet point in the center of the storm. He was a man who radiated an aura of absolute control. He listened as Graves delivered his report. Madeline Stillwell sat in one of the chairs opposite his desk, her arms crossed tightly. Homelander stood near the massive window, his back to the room, staring out at the city below. His expression was a mixture of boredom and simmering rage. "The evidence is conclusive," Graves finished, his voice steady despite the gravity of his words. He felt the weight of every eye in the room. Edgar's calculating stare, Stillwell's impatient glare, and the burning reflection of Homelander's gaze in the window. The attack on Sage Grove was perpetrated by the same organization responsible for what my team is now calling the Vortex Ascendant. The methodologies are a direct signature, a calling card left for us to find. He gestured to the large monitor on the wall, which split to show two sets of images. On one side, the bloodless bodies from the hotel party. On the other, the frozen remains from the asylum. First, the methodology of the kills. At the soup party, the cause of death was a microscopic puncture wound to the brainstem, instantaneous and requiring a level of precision that is frankly unheard of. At Sage Grove, the primary cause of death for most victims was a catastrophic drop in core body temperature, essentially being flash frozen from the inside. Again, an instantaneous method that leaves little external evidence. Both methods are designed for absolute silence and efficiency. Second, the infiltration and evasion, Graves continued, his tone becoming grimmer. At the soup party, our digital forensics team found that the security camera footage for the entire floor was put on a 5-minute loop for the duration of the attack. There was no forced entry on any of the doors. At Sage Grove, the entire server farm for the security system was physically melted. In both instances, the perpetrators moved through a secure facility like ghosts, leaving no digital or physical trace of their entry or exit. And finally, the most disturbing element, the method of mass incapacitation. At both locations, a large number of SUPs were rendered completely unconscious simultaneously and without a struggle. And at both locations, our most advanced chemical and biological sensors have found absolutely nothing. No gas, no toxin, no airborne agent. This suggests a level of technology or a type of superhuman ability that, as I stated in my initial soup party report, we cannot currently explain. It is either an unregistered telepath, or a form of traceless sonic or radiological weapon we have never encountered. The two events are linked beyond any doubt. This is a highly sophisticated and powerful organization, and they have now hit us twice. He let that sink in before continuing, his voice dropping slightly as he delivered the most alarming new detail. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 28, chapter 28, Vought 2. At the soup party, we theorized they had a powerful telepath, someone capable of rendering an entire room full of SUPs unconscious simultaneously. Graves' voice was laced with a professional detachment that barely masked a deep unease. He gestured, the light catching the holographic projections. The evidence at Sage Grove also supports this as the most likely method of incapacitation. However, the nature of the executions shows a significant improvement in their capabilities. He gestured again, his hand hovering over the chilling images of Lamplighter and Sam Riordan crystalline sculptures of their former selves. They've added a new asset to their roster, a cryokinetic of incredible power. The absolute zero temperatures required to flash freeze a pyrokinetic like Lamplighter, encase a heavily reinforced cell in ice, and freeze a powerhouse like Sam Riordan from the inside out represent a level of power we have rarely witnessed. This is a weapon. A terrifying weapon, capable of manipulating thermodynamics on an incomprehensible scale. They are actively collecting powerful and diverse soup assets, Graves continued, the implication hanging heavy in the air. The telepath, the cryokinetic, we have to assume they are either recruiting or, more likely, replicating these abilities for their own agents. They are building an arsenal that mirrors our own. Graves concluded, his voice a grim pronouncement. And they stole the entire supply of the stabilized compound V. Edgar finally spoke, his voice a low baritone that cut through the tension like a razor. Yes, sir, Graves confirmed, his jaw tight with suppressed frustration. Every last vial. Along with all of Dr. Cardos's research, every piece of his equipment, and every byte of data from the servers before they were utterly destroyed. They now possess the means to create their own army of stable sups. An army we won't know about until it's far too late. So, to summarize, Edgar said, his gaze sweeping over the faces in the room. An unknown organization has assassinated many of our low-level assets, destroyed a top-secret research facility, stolen our most valuable and dangerous new product, and has done so without leaving a single actionable piece of intelligence. Is that an accurate assessment, Mr. Graves? Yes, sir, that is accurate. Graves' voice held a resignation that spoke of thorough investigation. Madeline finally spoke. This is an act of war, Stan. No, Madeline, Edgar corrected, his voice still unnervingly calm, a quiet certainty that defied the chaos around them. War is loud. This is a corporate takeover, executed with the precision of an assassination. They are trying to bleed us, to steal from us, to weaken us from the shadows. So what do? Madeline demanded, her frustration boiling over. The Z-drug narrative is holding for now, but we can't possibly pin a burned-down asylum on a street-level drug cartel. This is too big to hide. We do nothing, Edgar said simply, the two words dropping into the room like stones into a still pond. The room fell into an immediate silence. Nothing, Madeline asked, her voice incredulous, a tremor of disbelief running through it. Publicly, we do nothing, Edgar clarified, his gaze unwavering. Sage Grove does not exist. It never existed. The fire was a tragic accident at a decommissioned psychiatric hospital. The bodies found inside were unfortunate squatters. We will use every ounce of our influence with the state government and the media to bury this story so deep it will never see the light of day. We cannot afford to admit that we are vulnerable. That someone can hit us like this and truly get away with it. Homelander, who had been a silent presence until now, pushed himself off the wall. The very air in the room seemed to crackle as he moved, a tangible shift in energy. Nothing, he snarled, his voice a dangerous rumble. His eyes began to glow with a furious red light, a visual manifestation of his escalating rage. Someone blows up our property, kills our people, and we do nothing. We should be out there, tearing the city apart until we find them. And what would you look for, Homelander? Edgar asked, his gaze unwavering as he met the soup's burning stare. A ghost? A telepath? A cryokinetic? You would be a sledgehammer in a room full of smoke. You would cause untold amounts of collateral damage, destroy public trust, and ultimately find nothing. You will do what you are paid to do. You will smile for the cameras and sell our products. You should continue what you are doing. We will let the professionals handle this. Homelander floated slowly towards the desk, the air around him crackling with suppressed power, tiny arcs of energy visible to the naked eye. I am a professional. His voice was laced with raw indignation. You are the face of this company's security, Edgar corrected him, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying more weight than Homelander's unleashed rage. You are the single most valuable asset we have. Your strength lies in your presence, your power, your image. I will not have that image tarnished by having you fly around the city on a blind chase after a shadow. That is beneath you. It makes you look desperate, not powerful. He let the words sink in, a calculated appeal directed precisely at Homelander's deep-seated narcissism, a subtle manipulation that often proved more effective than direct command. This is a game of intelligence. A dirty game, a game for men like Graves. Let us handle the dirty work. We will find them for you. And when we do, when we have a name, a location, a tangible target, we will point you in their direction and you can do what you do best. But until then, you must remain above it. You must remain the hero. For a tense moment, the fate of the city seemed to hang suspended. Then, with a low growl of pure frustration, Homelander's eyes slowly faded back to their natural blue. He knew Edgar was right. He had no target to punch, no enemy to incinerate, only an infuriating threat. Find them, Homelander hissed, his voice a chilling promise of future violence. Find them so I can burn them. He turned abruptly and vanished, the sonic boom of his departure rattling the heavily armored glass of the window, a violent punctuation mark to his reluctant compliance. Madeline let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, a shaky exhalation. He's getting harder to control, Stan. Her voice was reflecting a deep-seated worry. "He is a necessary evil," Edgar said, dismissing Homelander as a problem already managed. His gaze settled on Graves. His voice appeasing whispers moments before, now hardened into steel. "Graves, your previous investigation is null and void. Your new directive is absolute and comes with unlimited resources." He leaned forward slightly, a silent assertion of authority. "You will use every asset at your disposal. I want every surveillance network Vought owns dedicated to this. I want every human intelligence asset we have on the payroll activated. I want you to leverage our contracts with every three-letter agency we have in our pocket. NSA, CIA, FBI, get their data, legally or otherwise. I want a profile on every known cryokinetic on the planet, every telepath, every supe who has ever gone off-grid, no matter how obscure." Edgar paused, his eyes boring into Graves, the intensity of his stare demanding absolute attention. "Furthermore, you will open a priority requisition account with our suppliers. I don't care if it's Spencer Industries, Lockheed, or some back-alley arms dealer in Marrakesh. If there is a piece of technology, a weapon, or a surveillance system that can give us an edge, you will acquire it. Price is not a concern. Your sole purpose," Edgar concluded, his voice dropping to an intense, unwavering command, "is to find this organization. You will find out who they are, where they get their funding, who their assets are, and what they want. This is now the single highest priority in this company. Above the military contracts, above the 7, above everything else. It's time we reminded the world why we are the ones at the top of the food chain. It's time we started hunting back." Damn. From the silent darkness of my command center, I watched it all unfold. I had a live feed from Edgar's office, the audio so clear I could hear the faint tremor in Madeline's voice as she expressed her fear. I watched them theorize, I watched their posture, I watched the fear take root in their eyes. They were terrified, and they were looking in all the wrong places. They were looking for a rival corporation, a government black ops team, and an intricate conspiracy. They were looking for an army. They would never think to look for a single man. A cryokinetic, a powerful telepath, a whole organization? The system's voice was a torrent of unrestrained glee, almost buzzing with delight. "Boss, you're not just a ghost anymore. You're a damn poltergeist. You're a legend in the making. They're building a myth around you, and they don't even know your name." I took a slow sip of my coffee. The chaos unfolding in Vought Tower, an entertaining drama, a carefully orchestrated play for my private viewing. "Let them hunt," I said to myself, the words a soft murmur in the quiet room, a cold smile touching my lips. "The more they look for an army, the less they'll see the lone soldier walking right past their gates." Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 29, Chapter 29, Samurai. The shared laughter over a stupid breakfast joke was a turning point. It was a tiny crack in the icy wall she had built around herself, a sliver of light in the darkness of her trauma. In the days that followed, that single crack began to spread, branching out into an intricate web of understanding. Our routine settled into a quiet domesticity. Every morning, I would bring 2 trays of breakfast to her room. We would eat in a comfortable silence, a silent conversation passing between us through shared glances and small gestures. The tension was replaced by a sense of calm acceptance. We were simply 2 people sharing a space, each with our own ghosts. After breakfast one morning, I knew it was time to address the reality of her situation. I pulled out the sketchbook and a charcoal pencil, our established method of communication. I drew a crude map of the city, with a stylized V marking Vought Tower. Then I drew a series of stick figures with menacing expressions, all radiating out from the tower, their arms outstretched as if searching. In the center of their search pattern, I drew an isolated figure of a girl with long hair. I pointed to the girl, then looked at her, my expression serious. She understood immediately. Her face hardened once more. She took the pencil from my hand. With a few quick strokes, she drew bars around the girl, trapping her. Then she drew the menacing Vought figures closing in. She tapped the drawing with the pencil, her eyes asking the unspoken question. What now? I took the sketchbook back. I drew a large building around the caged girl, a fortress with thick walls. I drew myself standing guard outside it. Then I drew a large X over all the searching Vought figures. "You are safe here, they cannot find you." I spoke the words aloud in Japanese. "Vought is actively searching for you. Their security forces are turning the city upside down. They believe you are a rogue asset. Staying here is the safest place for you. They will never find you here." She looked at my drawing, then at me, her dark eyes searching my face. I could see the conflict within her. She was a weapon, and the idea of hiding, of being protected, likely chafed against every instinct she had. But she was also intelligent. She knew the power of Vought. She knew what they would do to her if they found her. She gave a single nod. With that understanding established, the dynamic between us shifted again. The penthouse was now her sanctuary. She began to explore it slowly. I gave her full access to the common areas, making it clear that the guest suite was her private space, but the rest of the apartment was a shared territory. At first, her explorations were almost timid. She would slip out of her room when she thought I was busy in my office, a silent ghost padding through the empty spaces. I would watch her on the security cameras, a small figure dwarfed by the cavernous rooms and floor-to-ceiling windows. She was fascinated by the view of the city below. She would stand at the window for hours, her hand pressed against the cool glass, just watching the tiny cars and people move far below. It was a world she had been stolen from, a world she was now seeing from a god's eye perspective. Her feral edges began to soften. The constant rage was replaced by a watchful curiosity. She discovered the entertainment system, and soon the apartment was filled with the sounds of Japanese movies and anime, a constant murmur that made the massive space feel a little less empty. I made it a point to be a non-threatening presence. I never pushed her to interact. I simply existed in the same space. I would work in my office with the door open. I would read a book in the living room while she watched a movie. I was letting her acclimate to my presence, to the idea that a person could be near her without being a threat. One afternoon, I was in the training room, practicing my cryokinesis. I was focused, creating razor-sharp sculptures of ice out of the moisture in the air, then shattering them into a cloud of glittering dust. I was so engrossed in my work that I didn't hear her enter. I turned and she was there. She stood silently in the doorway and watched me. Her expression was one of intense curiosity. She was looking at my hands, at the faint aura of cold that surrounded them. I stopped, letting the ice sculpture I was forming dissipate into a cool mist. I held up my hand, palm open, and created a small snowflake that hovered in the air above it. She took a cautious step into the room, her eyes never leaving the snowflake. She pointed at my hand, then at herself, a silent question in her eyes. "You are like me." I shook my head. "No," I said softly in Japanese. "Vought did this to you. I am something else." She took another step closer, her gaze shifting from the snowflake to my face. She reached out a hesitant hand to feel the cold air radiating from the ice. It was the closest she had been to me willingly since she had woken up here. In that moment, we were just two beings of immense power, acknowledging the strange reality of each other's existence. The trust between us was growing. It was no longer a single thread. It was a cord woven from shared silence and mutual respect and a common enemy. Our evenings fell into a new routine. We sat in the living room together. She sat on one couch and watched her shows. I sat on the other couch and worked on a tablet. My mind stayed deep in the digital entrails of the Vought network. I continued my surveillance of Sage Grove. One night, while watching an old samurai film, a particularly brutal fight scene came on screen. The hero was a whirlwind of motion, his katana a blur of silver. I glanced over at Kimiko. She was studying. Her eyes were narrowed, her body subtly mirroring the movements on screen. The warrior within her was still very much alive. On an impulse, I stood up and walked to the training room. I returned with 2 wooden practice swords. I held one out to her. She looked at the sword, then at me, her expression unreadable. She took it, the smooth wood of the handle fitting perfectly in her grasp. She stood up, her posture changing instantly. The quiet girl was replaced by the warrior. Her stance was perfect. I took my own stance opposite her, the other bakken held loosely in my hand. "Just practice," I said. She moved with a lethal grace that was breathtaking to behold. Her style was a whirlwind of ferocious strikes and impossibly fast movements. It was the style of someone who had fought for their life in the dirt and the dark. My own style was the opposite. It was a perfect synthesis of 100 different martial arts, a product of my combat mastery. I simply parried, blocked, and redirected. It was a conversation in motion. Her wild strikes would be met with a subtle shift of my wrist, a turn of my hip that would send her attack glancing harmlessly away. Her ferocious lunge would be met with a fluid block that absorbed her momentum. For 10 minutes, we moved in perfect harmony. She was the storm, and I was the unmovable mountain. With every strike she threw and every block I made, a deeper understanding passed between us. She was testing my strength, my skill, and my control. I was showing her that I was her equal, that I was not a threat to be feared, but an ally to be trusted. She stopped and breathed heavily. Sweat stood on her brow. A look of grudging respect replaced her feral rage. She gave me a formal bow. It was the bow of one warrior to another. I returned the bow. That night, she didn't retreat to her own room when her movie was over. She curled up on the far end of her couch and pulled a blanket over herself. She fell asleep to the rhythmic tapping of my fingers on my tablet. She was becoming a part of my quiet life. The penthouse started to feel like a home in an unexpected way. Goal: 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library: add to your library for updates. 30, chapter 30, flight 37 tragedy. The morning sun streamed through the floor to ceiling windows of the penthouse, bathing the living room in a deceptive golden warmth. Inside, it was a scene of domestic tranquility that stood in stark opposition to the chaotic reality of the world outside. I sat on the plush leather sofa, a mug of coffee in my hand. Beside me, sitting with her legs pulled up to her chest, was Kimiko. Her eyes were glued to the massive flat-screen TV mounted on the far wall. On the screen, a breaking news banner ran across the bottom in urgent red. Flight 37 tragedy. No survivors. Above the banner, the camera focused on a podium set up on a windswept beach. Behind it, the final resting place of a hijacked airliner. Standing at the podium, flanked by Queen Maeve, who looked pale and visibly shaken, was Homelander. He looked perfect. His cape fluttered in the sea breeze, his hair was immaculate, and his face was the grieving father of a nation. We arrived. Just 3 minutes after the plane went down, Homelander said, his voice breaking perfectly on the last word. He paused, looking down, composing himself. 3 minutes. If we had been notified sooner, if we had been part of the chain of command, we could have saved them. We could have saved them all. He looked up, staring directly into the camera, his blue eyes filled with a righteous intensity. But we aren't in the chain of command, he continued, his voice gaining strength. We are kept on the sidelines, and because of that, 123 people are dead, including children. Kimiko made a soft noise in her throat. Her hands were gripping her knees so tightly her knuckles were white. She hated him. She hated all of them, but there was a special kind of loathing reserved for the man in the flag. It is a performance, I said softly, speaking in Japanese. She looked at me, her eyes questioning. Look at his eyes, I said, pointing at the screen. There is no sadness there. He is standing on the graves of these people just to push the propaganda and force the military's hand. Vought wants sups in the military, I explained, keeping my tone neutral. They want the government contracts. This tragedy, it is exactly what they needed to convince the public. Now, everyone who watches this will think, if only Homelander had been in charge. They will demand it. Homelander leaned into the microphone, his voice dropping to a whisper that was broadcast to millions. Never again, I promise you, never again. Kimiko snatched the remote from the coffee table and clicked the TV off. The screen went black, silencing the lie. She stared at the black screen for a moment longer, then let out a long breath. She stood up and looked at me, then pointed towards the kitchen. She rubbed her stomach. I smiled. Lunch, good idea. We moved into the kitchen. It was an expanse of stainless steel and marble that I suspected Arian Spencer had rarely used for anything more complex than pouring a drink. What are we thinking? I asked her. Something simple, or do we try to recreate that dish from the show we watched last night? She walked over to the massive refrigerator and pulled out a variety of vegetables, bell peppers, onions, carrots, and a package of chicken breasts. She set them on the island and looked at me. "Stir fry it is," I said. I rolled up the sleeves of my shirt and washed my hands. Cooking with Kimiko had become a silent ritual. It was one of the few times we interacted as complete equals, working towards a shared goal. She took the knife block. Her movements with a blade were efficient. The carrots were reduced to uniform matchsticks in seconds. The onions were diced with the precision of a machine. I handled the meat, slicing the chicken into thin strips. "Pass the garlic," I said. She slid the bulb of garlic across the marble counter to me without breaking her rhythm on the peppers. I fired up the wok, the oil shimmering as it heated. I tossed in the garlic and ginger, the kitchen instantly filling with the savory aroma. Kimiko swept the vegetables into the pan at the perfect moment. We worked around each other, a dance of avoidance and cooperation. I reached for the soy sauce. She handed it to me before I could ask. She needed the sesame oil, so I slid it into her hand. "Careful with the chili oil," I warned as she reached for the bottle. "Last time you nearly burned a hole in the pan." She looked at me, a glimmer of amusement in her eyes, and deliberately added an extra splash. She looked back at me with a triumphant smirk. I laughed. "Fine. If we die of spice poisoning, I'm blaming you in the afterlife." We plated the food and sat at the kitchen island. We didn't move to the formal dining table. That felt too formal. Here, we were close. The food was spicy, thanks to her, but good. She ate with a focused intensity, a holdover from a life where meals were not guaranteed. I watched her for a moment. She had tied her hair back while cooking, revealing the sharp line of her jaw and the soft curve of her neck. She looked so normal, just a young woman enjoying a hot meal. "The soup is good," I said quietly, breaking the silence. "Better than the processed stuff Vought puts in the break rooms." She looked up, nodding slowly. She gestured toward the empty plate and then gave an appreciative thumbs up before pointing at me. "You are a good cook." She finished her meal and set her chopsticks down, aligning them perfectly parallel to each other. She looked at me, her expression softening. She reached out and touched the back of my hand for a brief second, a gesture of gratitude that carried more weight than 1,000 speeches. Then she stood up, took her plate to the sink, and washed it. She gave me a quiet nod before retreating to the living room to resume her vigil by the window. "I have work to do," I told her, standing up. "I'll be in the office. Don't open the door for anyone but me or Marcus." She nodded without looking away from the window. I walked down the hall to my office, the heavy door sealing with a reassuring click. I sat in my chair and woke the monitors. The screen flickered to life, showing the interior of a dimly lit apartment. Popclaw's apartment. She was a mess. Her hair was a tangled nest, her eyes were red-rimmed, and she was sitting on the sofa smoking weed, the thick scent of it filling the small apartment. She looked like a woman on the edge of a cliff, just waiting for the wind to push her over. A sudden gust of wind slammed through the room as A-Train arrived in a blur of high speed. The sheer force of his entrance made her jump, the joint nearly falling from her fingers. "Reggie," Popclaw gasped, her voice thick with shock. She scrambled up and threw her arms around his neck, clinging to him like a lifeline. "Where have you been? It's been days." "I've been handling business, baby," A-Train said, his voice tight. He hugged her back, but his eyes were darting toward the door. "But it's okay. It's okay now." She pulled back slightly, looking at him with desperate eyes. "You said we were in serious trouble. Did you fix it?" "I think I got it worked out," he said, forcing a small smile. "Actually, I have some good news. I talked to Madeline. She agreed to let us go public." Popclaw froze, her expression flickering between hope and suspicion. "Don't you lie to me, Reggie. Don't you dare." "Hand on a Bible," he said, looking her straight in the eye with an earnestness that felt almost real. "But listen, before we go public, I have to know. Who did you tell about the Compound V?" Popclaw hesitated, her lower back hitting the edge of the table. I don't know their names, but there was this British guy, dark hair with a smug look, a real asshole, and a guy with a buzz cut and a skinny white kid. They're all working together." Tears started to track through the grime on her face. "I'm so sorry, Reggie. I was just so scared." "It's fine," he soothed, his hand moving to stroke her hair. "You know what I'm thinking about right now? I'm thinking about our first date. I remember looking at you and thinking, finally, there's someone who isn't just affected by my fame. I fell for you right then and there. I love you." "I love you too," she whispered, leaning into him, closing her eyes as she let out a breath of pure relief. In one blurred motion, A-Train's hand swept down. He pulled a lethal dose of pure heroin from his suit. Before she could even blink, he drove the needle deep into her hands and slammed the plunger home. Popclaw gasped, her eyes wide open as the massive surge hit her heart. "Why?" She choked out, her voice a dying rasp. "Why?" He just held her tight, watching the light fade from her eyes as she slumped against him, dying slowly in the middle of the room. He stood up, wiping his eyes, and began to toss the apartment. He ripped open drawers and overturned cushions. He stopped at a shelf filled with stuffed animals. He reached out and grabbed a generic-looking teddy bear. With a snarl of frustration, he ripped the bear open. A tiny camera and transmitter fell out into his hand. F***K, he muttered. He looked around, realizing he was being watched, or had been. He followed the wire from the transmitter. He searched frantically until he found a hidden hard drive taped under the side table. He plugged it into Popclaw's laptop. The video was a jagged mess of movement on the screen. It showed Popclaw and him in a frantic embrace on the couch, the footage capturing the messy reality of their secret relationship. A-Train sat there, scrolling the footage backward. The timestamp ticked in reverse until the room was empty. Then, the door on the screen swung open. A man walked into the frame. He had a shaved head, goggles pushed up around his neck, and the restless energy of someone who lived in the shadows. Frenchie. The camera had recorded him perfectly. He was only in the shot for a few seconds, but his face was captured in high resolution. A train froze the frame. He leaned in, his eyes narrowing as he zoomed in until Frenchie's features filled the screen. He pulled out his phone and snapped a clear photo of the monitor. He opened a secure messaging app and attached the image. He sent it directly to the Vought Intelligence and Analytics Division. Goal: 100 Power Stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library: add to your library for updates. 31, Chapter 31, Mesmer. I stood in the doorway of the guest suite, watching Kimiko sleep. She was curled on her side, one hand tucked under her pillow. The moonlight filtered through the sheer curtains, casting a pale glow over her face. She looked peaceful, a stark contrast to the violence that defined her waking life. I stepped back, allowing the heavy door to click shut with a sound no louder than a heartbeat. I walked quietly down the hall to my office. The screens of my command center were already active, bathing the room in a cool blue glow. On the main monitor, 2 profiles were pulled up, the result of 3 hours of digital hunting earlier that evening. 2 targets, I murmured, my eyes scanning the live data streams I had hijacked. Mesmer and Splinter. Mesmer, the washed-up child actor? The system's voice buzzed in my head. I thought we were hunting big game. He's basically in a walking midlife crisis. He's a loose end, I thought back, typing a command to sync the GPS data to my phone. In the original timeline, he betrays the boys to Homelander for a chance at redemption. He's a rat, and rats carry diseases. I tapped the second profile. Splinter. A byproduct of the Sage Grove experiments who slipped through the cracks years ago, he's a narcissist with a cloning ability. Ah, I see. You want the loot, fair enough. Telepathy and cloning, that's a solid utility build. I reached the garage. Instead of the sedan, I chose a nondescript black motorcycle. It was easier to weave through traffic and easier to ditch if things went sideways. I pulled on my helmet, the black visor sliding down to mask my face. My tracking algorithm had locked them down. Mesmer was stagnant in Queens. Splinter was active in Chelsea. Let's go. Mesmer's apartment building was a depressing block of brick in a neighborhood that smelled of old garbage and broken dreams. I parked the bike 2 blocks away and approached on foot, melting into the shadows of the alleyway. I checked my phone. The GPS signal from Mesmer's phone was stationary. 3rd floor, apartment 3B. I reached the fire escape. In a blink, I was the size of a large beetle. The rusted metal of the fire escape ladder became a towering structure of iron. I jumped, my Tier 1 strength propelling my tiny body upward in a blur. I kicked off the wall of the first landing, then the second, my movements were light. I finally landed on the 3rd floor balcony with a soft tink. I scurried under the gap in the window frame. The apartment was a shrine to a dead career. Posters of the mesmerizer covered the walls, a smiling young boy who had the world at his fingertips. The man sitting on the stained beige recliner bore little resemblance to that boy. Mesmer was balding, overweight, and currently weeping softly into a glass of amber liquid as the TV blared the canned laughter of a sitcom from the 90s. I moved across the carpet, a tiny predator navigating a forest of synthetic fibers. Target scanned, Mesmer, Tier 4, telepathy. I reached the leg of the recliner. The fabric was rough, providing easy handholds. I moved to the back of his neck. The skin there was pale and sweaty. No ice tonight, I thought. Vought is looking for a cryokinetic. Let's give them something else to worry about. I punched. It was a normal punch that obliterated his spine, instantly severing the cord and pulping the brainstem. Mesmer went silent as his body convulsed in a violent spasm before going completely limp. The glass slipped from his fingers and fell to the carpet with a dull thud. His head lolled forward at an unnatural angle. The TV continued to play. Soup neutralized, Mesmer Tier 4, power telepathy. Choose option, retain or convert. Retain, I commanded silently. Power telepathy Tier 4, successfully integrated. The sensation was immediate. It felt like walking into a crowded room after wearing earplugs for a year. I jumped down from the corpse, landed on the carpet, and scurried back to the window. I slipped out into the night air, leaving the apartment exactly as I had found it. Damn. The club in Chelsea was a neon-lit temple of excess. The bass from the music thumped against my chest, even from the street. My intel placed Splinter here, using a credit card under an alias I had flagged hours ago. I shrank down in the shadows of a dumpster in the alley, becoming a speck of dust in the wind. I slipped through the crack under the heavy steel service door. The interior was a chaotic assault on the senses. Strobe lights flashed, bodies writhed on the dance floor. I navigated the club, sticking to the walls and the ceiling pipes to avoid being trampled by the giants dancing below. I found the VIP corridor, guarded by two massive bouncers. I crawled right over the shoe of the one on the left and slipped under the velvet rope. I checked the doors. Room 4, this was it. I found a vent near the ceiling and squeezed through the grate. I looked down. The room was dimly lit by red mood lighting. In the center, on a large leather couch, was a scene of pure narcissism. There was one blonde woman. She was clearly exhausted, and all around her were 5 identical men. Splinter had cloned himself 4 times. They were all engaged in a hedonistic frenzy with that blonde. Target scanned, Splinter Tier 4, cloning. Okay, yeah, that's gross, the system noted. Focus, I replied. I scanned the group. 4 of the Splinters were sweating profusely, their movements frantic. One looked smug and relatively fresh, sitting back slightly and holding a bottle of champagne. That was the original. The clones did the work, and the original took the glory. I reached out into the girl's consciousness. It was a frantic buzz of noise. She was tired, drugged, and wanting it to be over. I pushed a single thought into her mind. Sleep. Below me, the girl's eyes fluttered. Her head lolled back against the leather cushion, and her body went limp. Whoa, one of the Splinter clones said, pulling back. Is she out cold? The original Splinter laughed. He took a swig from the bottle. Guess she couldn't handle the firepower, boys. Too much man for one girl. He high-fived the clone nearest to him. Damn straight. We wore her out. My cardio is insane. Firepower, I repeated in my head. Let's test that. I dropped from the vent and fell through the air, a tiny projectile. I aimed for the original. He was leaning back, the bottle to his lips, his throat exposed. I landed on his collarbone. He didn't even have time to flinch. I drove my fist into the side of his neck. The impact was like a bullet. I punched a hole straight through his jugular and into his windpipe. Blood erupted in a high-pressure spray, coating the clone sitting next to him. The original Splinter dropped the bottle. He grabbed his neck, making a gurgling sound. His eyes bulged. As the original's brain began to panic, the clones reacted instantly. They screamed in unison, clutching their own necks as if they could feel the phantom pain. What the one clone shouted, then flickered. As the life drained from the original Splinter, the clones began to destabilize. Their skin turned gray, then translucent. The biokinetic energy that sustained them was snapping back to the source. One by one, they collapsed into piles of gray sludge that evaporated into steam. The original Splinter fell off the couch, thrashing on the floor, his blood pooling on the expensive rug. He looked around wildly, trying to see his attacker, but there was nothing there, just an empty room and a sleeping girl. I watched him die from the top of the couch. It took less than a minute. When his heart finally stopped, the last wisp of steam from the final clone vanished. Soup neutralized, Splinter Tier 4. Power cloning. Choose option, retain or convert. Retain. Power cloning Tier 4. Successfully integrated. I felt a strange sensation of multiplicity in my mind, a feeling that I could be in more than one place at once. Clean up. I scurried down to the floor. I avoided the blood. I checked the girl. She was deep in a telepathically induced slumber. She would wake up with a headache and a memory of passing out from exhaustion. She would find a dead body and call the police. The narrative would be simple: a drug-fueled heart attack or an aneurysm during S*X. Or, if the autopsy found the hole in his neck, a freak accident. I made my way to the door. I slipped underneath it, out into the thumping corridor, and navigated the maze of feet back to the exit. The ride back to the penthouse was faster. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the cold satisfaction of a job well done. I parked the bike in the garage and took the elevator up. The penthouse was quiet. I checked the time. 4:00 a.m. Kimiko was still asleep. I went to my office and sat down, peeling off the helmet. I could feel the new powers sitting in my mind like loaded weapons. Telepathy, cloning. Graves is going to lose his mind, I said softly, a smile touching my lips. He's looking for an unregistered cryokinetic. Now he has a tiny assassin who kills with invisible bullets. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 32, Chapter 32, Red Unit 1. The secure line on the desk buzzed once. I reached out and tapped the speakerphone icon. Mr. Spencer, the voice on the other end said, we received the priority alert from your personal terminal. You're requesting the Mark IV tactical platforms. I am, I said, leaning back in my chair, spinning a pen between my fingers. 10 units. But I don't want the standard factory specs, Vance. I need modifications. There was a pause on the line, the sound of keyboard clatter in the background. The Mark IV is already classified military hardware, Mr. Spencer. It's designed for heavy infantry support. What kind of modifications are we talking about? Strip the hydraulic assist for the exoskeleton, I said. Remove the weight limiters. I want the external plating doubled. Use the carbon nanotube weave we developed for the experimental tank program last year. Internal climate control, full spectrum sensor suites, and integrated encrypted comms linked solely to my server. Sir, Vance said, his tone shifting to one of professional concern. With those modifications, particularly the additional plating without the hydraulic assist, the suit will weigh nearly 600 pounds. A human operator won't be able to move in it. They'll be statues. The operators won't be normal humans, Vance, I replied smoothly. Just build the suits. Can you meet the 48-hour window? It will require pulling the engineering team off the railgun project, Vance noted. Pull them, I ordered, and one last thing, on the chest plate, center mass. I want a designation painted in dark crimson, just one word. Which is? Red. Red, Vance repeated. Understood. 10 units, 48 hours. Delivery to the penthouse secure elevator as usual. As usual, and Vance, no digital trail. If anyone asks, these are scrap metal from a failed prototype test. Understood, sir. The line clicked dead. I set the pen down and stood up, walking to the center of the spacious command center. System, I said aloud, it's time to expand the workforce. Cloning time, finally, the system's voice cheered in my head. I was wondering when we were going to start our own boy band, or a very coordinated dance troupe. Let's stick to a hit squad, I murmured. I closed my eyes, reaching inward. I felt the knot of energy that represented the cloning power I had taken from Splinter. I grasped it mentally and pulled. It felt like my cells were boiling, expanding, and splitting at hyperspeed. The air around me shimmered, the light bending and warping. Pop, 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 pop. 5 distinct displacements of air. I opened my eyes. Standing in a semicircle around me were 5 men. They were wearing the same charcoal gray loungewear I was. They had the same dark hair, the same eyes, the same height. I looked at the one in the center. He looked back at me. I didn't need to speak to know what he was thinking because I was thinking it. It was like having 5 extra limbs that just happened to be detached from my torso. Check in, I said. Red 1, the clone in the center said. His voice was my voice. Red 2, said the one to his right. Red 3. Red 4. Red 5. I walked up to Red 1. I reached out and grabbed his arm. The muscle beneath the fabric was hard as iron. Power check, I commanded. Red 1 turned to the heavy steel heavy bag I kept in the corner for stress relief, a custom piece filled with lead shot. He snapped a jab. Cracked. The chain holding the bag snapped instantly. The heavy bag flew across the room like a cannonball, slamming into the reinforced wall with enough force to shake the floorboards. It split open, spilling lead shot everywhere. Tier 1 strength confirmed, Red 1 said calmly, lowering his hand. I nodded, defense. Red 2 stepped forward. He pulled a combat knife from the pocket of his pants. I hadn't even realized I'd subconsciously manifested the inventory items for them and slashed it across his own palm. The blade skittered off his skin with a metallic rasp, not a scratch. Tier 1 defense confirmed, Red 2 said. Cryokinesis, I asked. Red 3 raised his hand. The temperature in the room plummeted instantly. A ball of ice formed above his palm. He clenched his fist, and the ice shattered into diamond dust. Tier 1 cryokinesis confirmed. It was perfect. They were full-power duplicates. You know the mission, I said to them. We are the red unit, Red 4 said. We are the ghosts, Red 5 added. Dissipate, I ordered. Their forms turned gray, then translucent, then dissolved into a fine mist that rushed back into my body. The rush of energy was intoxicating as they rejoined me. I checked my watch, 8:15 a.m. I turned and walked out of the command center, the heavy steel door locking automatically behind me. I went into the kitchen. The morning light was streaming in, making the marble countertops gleam. I washed my hands and started pulling ingredients from the fridge. I grabbed a fresh fillet of salmon, some miso paste, tofu, and a carton of eggs. I started cooking. The rhythm of the knife against the board was soothing. Chop, chop, chop. Scallions. Slice, slice. Salmon. 20 minutes later, the smell of grilling fish and savory miso soup filled the penthouse. I arranged the food on 2 trays, making sure the presentation was neat. I added a small bowl of pickled plums to hers. I had noticed she liked the sour taste. I walked down the hall to the guest suite. I balanced the tray on one hand and knocked 3 times. Knock. 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 Kimiko, I called out in Japanese. Breakfast is ready. I heard the soft pad of bare feet on the carpet. The lock clicked. The door opened. Kimiko stood there. She was wearing a fresh set of clothes, black leggings, and an oversized gray hoodie I had ordered for her. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail. She looked better. The dark circles under her eyes were fading. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 33, chapter 33, red unit 2. She looked at the food, then at me. She stepped back and opened the door wider. Good morning, I said, walking in and setting the trays on the table by the window. She nodded a greeting and sat down. She picked up her chopsticks, inspecting the fish. She looked at me, raising an eyebrow. Salted, I said, answering the unspoken question. Just a little. She took a bite. She chewed slowly, then nodded in approval. We ate in silence for a few minutes. It was a comfortable silence. She reached for the sketchbook on the table and flipped it open to a fresh page. She scribbled something quickly and turned it around. It was a drawing of a fish with a smiley face, giving a thumbs up. I chuckled, high praise, thank you. She smirked, a tiny expression that lit up her face. She was becoming normal, or as normal as someone like us could be. The peace was broken by the vibration of my phone on the table. I glanced at the screen. Marcus Thorne. "Excuse me," I said to Kimiko. I picked up the phone. "Thorne, what is it?" "Sir," Marcus's voice was professional, but there was an edge of urgency to it. "We just received a priority communique from Vought Tower, from the executive office." I wiped my mouth with a napkin. "Stan Edgar." "Yes, sir. Mr. Edgar is requesting a meeting with you." "Regarding?" "They're being vague, sir. Urgent security acquisition and consultation. They asked if you could be at Vought Tower within the hour." "Tell them I accept," I said. "Prepare the convoy, full formal detail. I want the armored SUVs." "Understood, sir. Convoy will be ready in 10 minutes." I hung up the phone. Kimiko had stopped eating. "I have to go out," I said in Japanese. She tilted her head, pointing a chopstick at the phone. "Trouble." "Business," I corrected. "Vought wants a meeting." At the word Vought, her hand clenched into a fist on the table. Her eyes darkened. She looked at the door, then back at me, her body tense. She made a gesture, 2 fingers walking, then pointing at herself. "I go with you." "No," I said gently but firmly. "It's a meeting in their tower. Homelander might be there. It's too dangerous for you." She frowned, looking unhappy. She pointed at me, then made a fist. "You fight." "I'm not going to fight," I said. "I'm going to sell them things. I'm going to smile and shake their hands and take their money. It's a different kind of war." She studied my face for a long moment. She didn't like it, but she trusted me. Slowly, her hand relaxed. "Stay here," I told her. "Marcus has the perimeter locked down. No one gets in. You are safe. Watch your drama show, the one with the samurai. Practice your drawing. I will be back soon." She nodded. I stood up, finished the soup. "It's good for you." I walked out of the room. The underground garage was a hive of activity. Security personnel were checking weapons and earpieces. 5 Black Spencer Industries SUVs were lined up, engines idling, their polished armor gleaming under the harsh lights. Marcus opened the rear door of the 3rd vehicle. "Sir," he said, "we're locked and loaded. Route is clear." I nodded and slid inside. I adjusted my tie in the reflection of the window. Navy blue suit today, power tie. I looked like a shark in human skin. The convoy rolled out. We hit the streets of Manhattan, a line of black steel cutting through the yellow cabs and traffic. People stopped on the sidewalks to watch us pass. Wealth and power always drew a crowd. We pulled up to the VIP entrance of Vought Tower 20 minutes later. The building loomed over us, a black obelisk of corporate dominance. Statues of the 7 stood guard in the plaza, Homelander looking noble, Maeve looking fierce. It was all a lie carved in bronze. My door opened. I stepped out, flanked immediately by Marcus and 3 other guards. Waiting just inside the glass doors was a welcoming committee. Madeline Stillwell stood at the front, flanked by 2 junior executives who looked terrified. I buttoned my jacket and walked toward the doors. The automatic glass slid open. "Mr. Spencer," Madeline said, stepping forward with a bright smile. She extended her hand. "Thank you so much for coming on such short notice. We truly appreciate it." I took her hand. "Ms. Stillwell, always a pleasure. When Stan Edgar calls, one tends to answer." "He's very eager to see you," she said, gesturing towards the elevators. "These are difficult times. We value our partners." "I heard about the trouble," I said as we walked through the lobby. "The Z-drug crisis, terrible business, and the fire in Pennsylvania." Madeline didn't break stride, but her smile tightened just a fraction. "A tragic accident. We're very concerned about the safety of all our facilities right now. Hence the meeting." "Of course," I said smoothly. "Safety first." We reached the executive elevators. Stillwell scanned her badge and the doors opened. We stepped inside, Marcus following close behind. The ride to the 99th floor was silent. The air was thick with unsaid things. Stillwell was radiating stress. I could smell it on her, expensive perfume masking the scent of fierce sweat. The doors opened onto the executive floor. It was quiet, and the carpet thick enough to swallow footsteps. "Mr. Edgar is in his office," Stillwell said, leading the way. We reached the double doors. "Mr. Spencer," she said, "Mr. Edgar requested a private audience." I turned to Marcus. "Stand by." "Sir," Marcus nodded, taking a position by the door, his eyes scanning the hallway. I opened the door and walked in. Stan Edgar was sitting behind his desk. The room was lit mostly by the natural light from the massive window that overlooked the city. He didn't look up immediately. He finished signing a document, closed the folder, and placed it precisely on a stack. Then he looked at me. His face was unreadable, his eyes dark and intelligent. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 34, chapter 34, read unit 3, Arian, he said, standing up. Thank you for coming. Stan, I said, walking over to shake his hand. It's been a while. Davos, wasn't it? He said. Your father was still running the show then. He was, I agreed. You look well. I look tired, Edgar corrected, gesturing to a chair. Please, sit. I sat. Madeline mentioned urgent security needs. You sound like a man preparing for a siege. Edgar sat down, folding his hands on the desk. In a manner of speaking. I'll get straight to the point, Arian. I don't have the luxury of dancing around the issue. Vought is under attack. The drug cartels? I asked, feigning ignorance. If only, Edgar said dryly. We are dealing with a hostile entity. A sophisticated organization with military-grade capabilities. They have struck our assets with impunity. And you want me to sell you a proton pack? I joked. Edgar didn't smile. I want you to sell me the Argus grid. I leaned back, letting out a low whistle. Stan, the Argus satellite network is proprietary. It's still in beta testing with the DoD. I can't just hand over the keys. I don't want the keys, Edgar said. I want real-time thermal and facial recognition tracking on a global scale. I want to know when a mouse sneezes in one of my facilities. That's a tall order, I said, and expensive. Name your price, Edgar said instantly. It's not just about money, I countered. It's about allocation. My manufacturing lines for the sensor suites are booked solid for the next 18 months. The Pentagon, the British MOD, everyone wants the new toys. I need them now, Edgar said, his voice dropping an octave. I need the sensor suites, and I need your new sonic incapacitation arrays. The heavy industrial models. The ones designed for riot control, I asked. The ones designed to drop a rhino at 50 paces, Edgar corrected. I need 20 units. Shipped immediately. I tapped my finger on the armrest, pretending to calculate. Stan, you're asking me to break contracts with the U.S. government to supply a private corporation. That's political suicide. I'm offering you the future, Edgar said. When the superhuman military bill passes, Vought will control the national defense. We will need a partner to build the infrastructure, the containment, and the logistics. I am offering Spencer Industries the exclusive contract for the next 20 years. I paused. It was a staggering offer. Exclusive, I asked. Ironclad, Edgar promised. You help me secure my house now, and I will make sure your company is the only one building the walls for the next generation. I looked at him. He was desperate. He was terrified of the unknown enemy that had burned his labs and frozen his sups. He needed a shield, and I was the only blacksmith in town. Fine, I said. I'll shuffle the delivery schedule. I'll divert the sonic units from the Chicago order. You'll have them in 3 days. And I'll grant your security chief read-only access to the Argus feed for the North American sector. Edgar let out a breath. Thank you, Arian. Don't thank me, I said, standing up. Just have your legal team draft that exclusivity contract. I want it on my desk by morning. It will be there, Edgar said, standing as well. I should get going, I said. I have to go tell a general why his toys are going to be late. Edgar walked around the desk. I'll walk you out. I raised an eyebrow. You don't have to do that. I think it sends the right message, Edgar said. We walked out of the office together. Stillwell watched us, her eyes wide. Seeing Stan Edgar escort anyone was a statement. Seeing him escort a 25-year-old arms dealer was a declaration. We took the elevator down to the lobby. How is the rest of the business? Edgar asked as the numbers ticked down. Booming, I said. War is a growth industry. Indeed, Edgar murmured. The doors opened. The lobby was busy. As we stepped out, the conversation died. Heads turned. Stan Edgar was a myth to most of these people. Seeing him in the flesh was like seeing a unicorn. We walked towards the exit. Near the security desk, a crowd had gathered. Flashes of cameras were going off. Ah, Edgar said, stopping. It seems we have a celebrity. In the center of the crowd was Starlight. She was wearing the new costume, the white bodysuit with the high-cut legs and the plunging neckline. She looked uncomfortable, her arms crossed over her chest as if trying to cover herself, but she was smiling for the fans. Starlight, Edgar called out. The crowd parted instantly for the CEO. Starlight looked up, her eyes widening. Mr. Edgar, she said, looking surprised. I'd like to introduce you to someone, Edgar said, gesturing to me. This is Arian Spencer, CEO of Spencer Industries. Starlight looked at me, she blinked. Spencer Industries, she asked, her voice skeptical. The weapons contractor. That's us, I said, smiling. But, she looked me up and down, you look younger than I expected. I get that a lot, I said with a small smile. I took over the family business a few years ago. Wow, she said, I expected. I don't know, someone scarier. I can be scary if the situation calls for it, I said. But today I'm just a fan. A fan, she asked, raising an eyebrow. I saw the video, I said. The one of you saving that girl, it was impressive. She flushed, looking down. Yeah, well, not everyone thinks so. The people who matter do, I said. Authenticity is a rare commodity, Starlight. Don't let them grind it out of you. I glanced pointedly at her costume, then back at her eyes, even if they try to dress it up in marketing. She looked at me, surprised by the candor. Thanks, she said quietly, I'll try. Arian, Edgar said, checking his watch. I know you have a schedule. Right, I said. Starlight, pleasure meeting you. You too, she said. I turned and walked out the glass doors. Marcus was holding the car door open. I slid into the back seat of the SUV. Back to the penthouse, sir, Marcus asked. Yes, I said. The convoy pulled away. I watched Vought Tower recede in the distance. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 35, chapter 35, Stan Edgar 1. 3 rhythmic knocks echoed against the heavy oak doors of the executive office on the 99th floor. Enter, Stan Edgar's voice answered, cutting through the absolute silence of the room. The heavy doors opened, and Graves stepped inside. He closed the doors securely behind him, ensuring the biometric locks engaged with a soft click. He held a leather-bound folder under his left arm. You requested immediate notification of any anomalies matching our current threat profile. Mr. Edgar, Graves said, his voice a flat monotone. I have 2. Both occurred within the last 12 hours. Take a seat, Graves, Edgar instructed, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. I assume, given that you bypassed the standard crime analytics chain of command, these are not standard incidents of our assets engaging in typical self-destructive behavior. They are not, sir, Graves said, sitting down and placing the folder squarely on the polished wood between them. We have 2 confirmed casualties. The first is Mesmer, discovered in his apartment in Queens. The second is Splinter, a biokinetic cloner originating from the Sage Grove program, discovered in a private VIP room at a nightclub in Chelsea. Edgar leaned back in his chair, his hands steepled beneath his chin. 2 D-list assets, one a washed-up telepath, the other a hedonist with a severe personality disorder. Neither of them holds any strategic value to this company. Why does this warrant my immediate attention? It is not the victims that warrant your attention, sir, Graves replied, tapping the cover of the folder. It is the methodology. They were killed within exactly 34 minutes of each other, at locations on opposite sides of the city. A coordinated strike, then? Edgar asked, his dark eyes focusing intently on Graves. You believe this is the work of the same organization that orchestrated the soup party and the Sage Grove facility. That is where the profile diverges, Mr. Edgar, Graves said. Please open the folder. Look at the preliminary autopsy report for Mesmer. Edgar opened the folder, his expression remaining perfectly impassive as he scanned the first page. Read the primary cause of death to me, Graves. A single blunt force impact to the C1 vertebra, Graves recited from memory. The spinal cord was completely pulverized. The sheer kinetic force required to cause that specific damage without decapitating the target entirely is immense. And the crime scene? Edgar asked, turning the page. Pristine, Graves answered. The door was deadbolted from the inside. The building's security cameras show no one entering or exiting his hallway for 4 hours prior to the estimated time of death. Furthermore, our sweep of the apartment yielded 0 foreign DNA, no fingerprints, no hair follicles, and no trace of forced entry. Edgar slowly nodded, his eyes scanning the glossy crime scene photographs. That matches the signature of our ghost organization. It does, Graves agreed. But look at the second file, sir, the incident in Chelsea. Edgar flipped to the next section. He studied the photographs for a long moment before speaking. A nightclub. This is a significantly riskier environment than a locked apartment. Exactly, Graves said. Splinter had rented a private room. He was in the company of a civilian female. Based on the residue, he had activated his power, creating 4 duplicates of himself. They were engaged with the civilian when the attack occurred. And the cause of death? A high-velocity puncture wound, Graves stated, his voice devoid of any inflection. It originated at the collarbone, driving downward at an extreme angle, punching a hole straight through the jugular vein and the trachea. Exsanguination was nearly instantaneous. What of the clones? Edgar asked. They destabilized the moment the original host expired, Graves explained. We were left with 1 corpse, 1 massive blood pool, and the civilian. Did she see the attacker? No, sir. She was unconscious. Our medical team found no trace of sedatives or narcotics in her system that would account for the depth of her coma. It resembles a neurologically induced sleep. A telepathic push, perhaps. Edgar closed the folder. So, we have a crushed spine in Queens and a punctured throat in Chelsea. 2 different methods of execution, 34 minutes apart. Yes, sir. You stated earlier that this profile diverges from the previous massacres, Edgar said, his tone turning analytical. Explain your reasoning, Graves. The Soup Party and Sage Grove were coordinated operations, Graves said, leaning forward slightly. They utilized complex digital wiping of heavily encrypted corporate servers and the simultaneous executions of dozens of highly durable targets. Those events required a well-trained team, logistics, and support structures. They were military campaigns. And these? These were intimate, Graves said firmly. Look at the precision, Mr. Edgar. Splinter was killed in a room full of his own clones, yet only the original was targeted. Mesmer was killed quietly in his chair while his television was still running. The sheer speed of the strikes, moving from Queens to Chelsea, bypassing all security, striking with overwhelming localized force. It does not feel like a squad of operatives. You believe this is the work of a single individual, Edgar concluded, his voice a low murmur. A highly trained individual, yes, Graves said. If the previous attacks were the organization making a statement, this feels like an operative tying up loose ends. But why these 2? Edgar asked, his eyes narrowing. Mesmer is a washed-up mind reader. Splinter is a forgotten biokinetic experiment. They have no connection to our current military contracts, no connection to compound V distribution, and no connection to each other. That is the variable we are currently analyzing, sir. It is possible they possessed information regarding the organization, or perhaps their specific power sets were deemed a threat to the operative's operational security. Or perhaps, Edgar suggested coldly, the operative simply wanted them dead. Let us return to the forensics, Graves. You are missing a key component in your presentation. You have described the damage, but you have not explained the vector of attack. How does an assassin enter a locked room, generate the force to shatter a spine, and leave without disturbing a single dust mote? Graves took a breath. That brings me to the most disturbing aspect of our analysis, sir. We ran algorithmic simulations based on the angle and trajectory of the fatal blows. And what did the simulations conclude? Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 36, chapter 36. Stanager 2. The strike on Mesmer, Graves began, originated from the back of the neck, hitting the C1 vertebra directly. However, the bruising pattern on the surrounding tissue is incredibly localized. It implies that the striking surface was no larger than a standard coin, yet it delivered kinetic energy equivalent to an industrial hydraulic press. Edgar's expression remained perfectly still. And Splinter. The puncture wound on his collarbone, Graves continued, was driven downward. The diameter of the entry wound is barely larger than a hypodermic needle. Yet, it carried enough velocity to tear through bone and cartilage without deflection. Furthermore, the angle of the attack suggests the assailant was positioned directly on top of the victim's chest or shoulder when the blow was struck. Positioned on the victim's shoulder, Edgar repeated, tasting the words. A striking surface the size of a coin. A puncture wound the diameter of a needle. Yes, sir. Are you suggesting a specific superhuman classification? Edgar said. I am, sir, Graves confirmed. The only tactical explanation that fits the physical evidence is an assailant with the ability to alter their physical size. One who retains their mass and kinetic output regardless of their scale. Edgar turned his chair slightly, looking out the massive window at the city sprawling beneath them. A microscopic assassin. It is an elegant solution to a complex security problem. A target the size of an insect could bypass almost any conventional perimeter. Exactly, sir, Graves said. And if this individual is working for that ghost organization, it explains how they were able to infiltrate the Soup Party and Sage Grove so flawlessly before initiating their larger operations. Edgar turned his chair back to face Graves. How many assets with this specific classification do we currently have on record? The pool is extremely limited, Mr. Edgar, Graves stated, opening the folder to the final page. Historically, size alteration is a rare manifestation of compound V until recently. Our most prominent asset in this category was termite. You say was, Edgar noted. Yes, sir. Termite was discovered dead in his apartment several weeks ago. The official coroner's report ruled it a catastrophic polysubstance overdose. Our internal sweep confirmed the presence of excessive narcotics. A convenient overdose, Edgar said smoothly, his tone laced with skepticism. Occurring just before this organization begins its campaign of surgical strikes. If termite is deceased, who does that leave us? We have 2 known sups with confirmed size alteration abilities on our global registry, Graves answered, reading from his notes. The first is Emma Mayer, a student currently enrolled at Godalkin University. Her power is tied to caloric intake and purging. She can shrink to a minimum size of 1 centimeter under extreme physical duress. A university student, Edgar evaluated, unlikely to possess the tactical training or the psychological conditioning required for this level of wet work. Who is the second? A mid-tier independent contractor operating under the moniker Tiny Hero, Graves reported. His power allows for size reduction without the biological triggers required by Mayer. He has a history of freelance corporate espionage and low-level infiltration. An independent contractor, Edgar repeated. Precisely the type of asset a well-funded shadow organization would recruit or coerce. My thoughts exactly, sir, Graves said. I recommend we bring both of them in for immediate interrogation. If they are involved, we will extract the information. If they are not, we eliminate the variables. Edgar held up a single hand, stopping Graves instantly. You will not bring them in, not yet. Graves frowned, a rare display of confusion. Sir, if they are the assassins. If they are the assassins and they realize we are actively moving against them, they will go underground. Or worse, they will strike at our recovery teams, Edgar explained patiently. You have just detailed how this operative bypassed every security measure we have, murdering 2 of our assets with absolute impunity. You do not kick the hornet's nest when you cannot see the hornets. Then what are your orders, sir? We monitor the situation closely and act when the time is right, Edgar said, his voice lowering into a register of absolute authority. I have just concluded a very productive meeting before you arrived, Graves. I met with Arian Spencer. Graves's eyes widened a fraction. Spencer Industries, sir, their waiting lists for advanced tech are years long. I have already secured immediate access to the Argus satellite surveillance grid for the entire North American sector. Edgar said, a hint of cold satisfaction in his voice. Furthermore, I have secured an immediate shipment of 20 prototype sonic incapacitation arrays, the heavy industrial models. The Argus grid, Graves breathed. That gives us real-time thermal tracking and facial recognition through solid structures. Precisely, Edgar said. And the sonic arrays are designed to rupture equilibrium and liquefy soft tissue at specific frequencies. They are area denial weapons of the highest caliber. Edgar leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk. Here is how we proceed. You will place Emma Mayer and Tiny Hero under total surveillance. I want every thermal signature they emit tracked 24 hours a day. I want to know when they eat, when they sleep, and when they use their abilities. Do not let your human operatives anywhere near them. Let the satellites do the work. We monitor them to rule them out, Graves summarized. Or to confirm their guilt, Edgar corrected, if you detect any deviation in their patterns. And what if we confirm their involvement? Graves asked. You will deploy the Spencer Industries sonic arrays, Edgar said, his voice as hard as diamond. You will activate the devices at maximum frequency, and you will flatten the entire city block if you have to. Understood, Mr. Edgar. Graves closed the folder and stood up. I will integrate the Argus feeds into our command center immediately, sir. The sonic arrays will be deployed to our rapid response teams the moment they arrive. Ensure that you do, Edgar said, picking up his pen, signaling the meeting was over. And Graves. Graves paused at the door. Yes, sir. Do not fail. If this shrinking assassin strikes another of our assets while under your watch, the consequences will not be limited to the victims. I understand perfectly, sir, Graves said. He opened the heavy oak doors and stepped out into the hallway, pulling his phone from his pocket before the doors even clicked shut. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 37, Chapter 37, Project Odessa 1. The hum of the electric engine was the only sound on the desolate stretch of road. The armored transport rolled steadily through the darkness of the Pennsylvania countryside. Inside, the air was cool, recycled by the internal climate control of the Mark IV tactical assault suits. 5 figures sat in the rear compartment, their black matte armor absorbing the faint ambient light from the dashboard. On the chest of each suit, the word red was stenciled in blood-colored crimson. Red 1 sat nearest the door. He rolled his neck, the servos in the suit whining almost imperceptibly. He looked down at his gloved hands. Under the armor, he was now a perfect physical replica of Sergeant Miller, a known wetwork operative for General Raddick, a man who had publicly opposed Spencer Industries' encroachment into the defense sector. Check your faces, Red 1 said, his voice a distorted growl through the helmet's comms. Red 2, sitting opposite him, tapped the side of his helmet. Biometrics confirmed. I am Corporal Banks. Confirmed, Red 3 said from the back. Lieutenant Kovacs. Good, Red 1 said. The Argus satellite passes overhead in 4 minutes. Distance to target, Red 4 asked. 5 kilometers out, Red 2 replied. We are at the drop point. Any closer and the ground sensors will pick up the tire vibrations. Red 1 reached forward and tapped the autopilot. Maintain speed, 30 kilometers per hour. The vehicle's computer chirped a confirmation. The rear doors hissed open. The 5 armored figures stepped out onto the asphalt, the night air heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. The car continued rolling down the road, a ghost ship drifting into the night. They stood on the shoulder of the road. 5 kilometers of dense forest stood between them and Project Odessa, the buried secret that had birthed the world's greatest nightmare. Red 2 stepped to the center. Link up. We will need 5 jumps to breach the perimeter. Red 1 took Red 2's right hand. Red 3 took the left. Red 4 and Red 5 grasped the shoulders of the others. Grip check, Red 2 said. Jump 1, 3, 2, 1. Pop. One moment they were standing on the roadside. Next, they were deep in the forest, surrounded by towering oaks. 1 kilometer, Red 2 stated, his breathing steady. Reorienting, north-northwest. Jump 2. Pop. They appeared in the ground wet with mud. Jump 3. Pop. They were on a ridge now. Through the trees, the faint glow of security floodlights was visible in the distance. Jump 4. Pop. The hum of a perimeter fence generator was audible. Jump 5, execute. Pop. They materialized on the concrete access road, directly in front of the heavy steel gate of the facility. 2 guards stood in the guard booth. They jumped, startled by the sudden appearance of 5 armored giants out of thin air. 1 guard reached for the panic button. Red 4 stepped forward, extending a hand. Sleep. The guard's eyes rolled back in his head, his hand going limp inches from the alarm. He slumped forward onto the console. The second guard fumbled for his rifle, his mouth opening to scream. Drop, Red 4 commanded, focusing his will. The guard's knees buckled. He collapsed to the concrete, unconscious before he hit the ground. Red 3 raised a hand. The air around the surveillance camera mounted on the gate post shimmered. Instantly, a thick coating of white frost encased the lens, blinding it. Red 1 walked to the massive steel gate. It was designed to stop a truck ramming it at full speed. He jammed his armored fingers into the small gap between the 2 sliding doors. He pulled. There was a screech of tearing metal that sounded like a dying beast. The heavy steel gears of the gate mechanism shattered with a sound like a gunshot. The doors groaned, warped, and then slid apart, the metal buckling under the impossible force. They moved into the facility courtyard. It was a concrete box buried in the earth. The entrance to the underground lab was a heavy blast door set into a concrete bunker. Red 1 approached the blast door. Clang! The door caved in, a massive dent appearing in the center. The locking mechanism sheared off. He grabbed the edge of the warped metal and ripped the door from its frame, tossing it aside like a piece of cardboard. They descended the ramp into the earth. The air grew colder. The smell of ozone and antiseptic became overpowering. A squad of 4 Vought security personnel came running down the corridor, weapons raised. Hold fire, the lead guard shouted. Identify your. Red 3 swept his hand in a horizontal arc. Freeze. The air in the corridor turned white. The temperature dropped to absolute 0 in a moment. The 4 guards flash frozen mid-stride, their bodies turning into statues of ice, their faces locked in expressions of surprise. Red 1 walked forward. Crunch. Shatter. The frozen bodies disintegrated into thousands of shards of red ice and frozen flesh as the armored suit plowed through them. They reached the main laboratory floor. It was an underground complex filled with humming machinery, glass observation tanks, and rows of medical beds. Technicians and scientists in white coats froze as the 5 black armored figures marched in. Security, a scientist screamed, reaching for a phone. Red 5, who had been walking silently at the back, shrank. In the blink of an eye, he was a speck on the floor, moving at 60 miles per hour. He shot up the leg of the scientist's table, launched himself into the air, and resized to full mass, but only 6 inches of height, right at the scientist's neck. He struck the scientist's jugular with a force that decapitated him internally. The scientist dropped. Red 1 grabbed a security guard by the vest and threw him. The man flew 50 feet, slamming into a reinforced glass wall with enough force to liquefy his internal organs. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 38, Chapter 38, Project Odessa 2. A scientist tried to run. Red 3 dropped a hand and touched the floor. A jagged trail of ice surged forward, instantly welding the man's legs to the concrete, which snapped off at the ankles as his momentum carried him forward. Red 2 teleported around the room, appearing behind fleeing staff. He grabbed them, teleported them 10 feet into the air and dropped them, or he teleported them halfway into a wall. Red 4 walked calmly through the chaos. A guard aimed a pistol at him. Red 4 looked at him. End it, Red 4 whispered. The guard's hand shook. He slowly turned the gun, placed the barrel in his own mouth, and pulled the trigger. Within 2 minutes, the staff of Project Odessa were dead. Red 4 tapped the side of his helmet, his internal HUD cycling through various spectrums before locking onto high-contrast thermal. Thermal imaging is active. They are in the stasis wing, to the left. They walked into the stasis wing. It was a long hall lined with glass pods and medical beds. Tubes and wires ran from the ceilings, feeding fluids into the wasted bodies of the subjects. Waste products of the Homelander project, Red 1 noted, reading the charts at the foot of the beds. Red 5 shrank down to the size of a rat. He moved to the first bed. The subject was a man with gelatinous skin, a Tier 5 mutant whose bones had dissolved years ago. He was kept in a tank of nutrient gel. He climbed the tank, he dove into the gel, he swam to the subject's face. He placed his tiny hands on the breathing tube inserted in the man's throat and squeezed. He crushed the man's trachea beneath it. Bubbles rose. The heart monitor was flatlined. He moved to the next, a woman with feathers growing out of her eyes. He resized to 1 foot tall, standing on her chest. He drew his combat knife and drove it into her heart. Red 4 moved down the line of Tier 5s. He placed his hand on the forehead of a comatose patient whose skin secreted acid. "Shut down," Red 4 commanded. He sent a psychic spike directly into the medulla oblongata, commanding the heart to stop beating. The monitor turned into a solid tone. There were 7 Tier 4. One was a man made of living stone, but he was cracked. Another was a woman whose body temperature was so high she had to be kept in a liquid nitrogen bath. Red 3 approached the stone man. He placed his hand on the stone chest. He lowered the temperature until the atomic bonds of the stone structure failed. Thermal shock. Cracked. The stone man's chest shattered into dust. He moved to the woman in the nitrogen bath. "You like the cold?" he asked. "Have more." He drained the heat from the nitrogen itself, taking it down to absolute zero. The woman's blood crystallized instantly. Her heart shattered inside her chest. He moved down the line, a boy with elastic skin that had stretched too far and never snapped back. He froze him solid, then tapped him with a finger. The boy shattered like glass. There were 3 Tier 3. The first was a massive figure, strapped down with metallic weave chains. His skin was gray, like old iron. "Regeneration," Red 1 said. "Annoying." He grabbed the subject's head. He squeezed. The sound of the skull collapsing was like a car crusher. The regeneration factor tried to knit the bone back together, but Red 1 kept squeezing until the brain was paste. He tore the head from the body and tossed it into the corner. The second Tier 3 was telekinetic. She was lobotomized, but her power flared unconsciously, rattling the bed frame. Red 2 touched the woman's arm. "Pop." They vanished. "Pop." Red 2 reappeared alone. Red 1 looked at the concrete wall. A human hand was protruding from the stone, lifeless. The final Tier 3 was a man whose body generated lethal radiation. He was kept in a lead-lined box. Red 3 approached the lead glass. He placed his hands on the glass. The lead grew white with frost. The man inside, glowing with green energy, began to dim. The cold sapped the energy, slowing the atomic reaction. The man shivered, his glow fading to a dull pulse. Then Red 3 clenched his fist. He froze the fluid in the man's eyes, expanding it until it pierced the brain. Red 1 and Red 2 went to the equipment lockers. They began grabbing the multi-million-dollar sequencers, the centrifuges, and the scanning arrays. Red 1 touched a massive electron microscope. It vanished. He touched a rack of servers. Vanished. Red 2 teleported around the room, touching the heavy machinery mounted to the ceilings. Touch, vanish. Touch, vanish. Within 10 minutes, the facility was stripped bare. Red 4 was standing at the main terminal. He had plugged a data spike into the port. Copying, encryption bypassed, downloading, complete. He typed a command, drives formatted, overwriting with garbage data. Red 1 reached into his inventory, accessing the shared storage of the host, and pulled out the incendiary canister. He walked to the center of the empty lab. He placed the canister on the floor. "Timer set, 60 seconds," he said. They formed the chain again. Red 2 took point. "Jump 1. Pop." They were at the blast door. "Jump 2. Pop." They were at the courtyard gate. "Jump 3. Pop." They were in the woods, the facility lights fading behind them. "Jump 4. Pop." 1 kilometer out, they stopped. Red 1 looked back. Through the trees, the ground rumbled. A muffled thump echoed from the earth. Then, the ventilation shafts protruding from the ground in the distance began to spew fire. "Jump 5. Pop." They materialized inside the moving vehicle. The car accelerated, the autopilot disengaging as Red One took the wheel. They drove for 30 minutes, heading deeper into the state, towards a known black site operated by General Radek. They pulled the car off the road, hiding it in a dense copse of trees less than a mile from Radek's base. They stepped out of the car. They stood in the dark woods, the lights of Radek's base visible through the leaves. In unison, they relaxed their hold on the physical world. The armor, the bodies, the weapons, it all turned gray, then smoky. 5 figures dissolved into mist. The mist swirled for a moment in the night air, then shot upwards, streaking across the sky, returning to the source in New York City. Goal: 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library: add to your library for updates. 39, Chapter 39, Spoils of War. I sat in the silence of my command center, the high-backed leather chair supporting me as the last wisps of the gray mist dissipated into my skin. The physical sensation of their return was a sudden influx of memories and sensory data that wasn't mine, yet belonged to me completely. I felt the phantom recoil of the gate being ripped open, the chill of the cryokinetic blasts, and the grim satisfaction of the kills. "Welcome back, boys." The system's voice cheered in my head, vibrating with the digital equivalent of a standing ovation. That was a masterclass. Clean, brutal, and totally framed on the wrong guy. General Radek is going to have a very bad week, but enough about politics. Let's get to the best part. "The harvest," I murmured, leaning forward. "Exactly, the loot. Open the bag, boss, let's see what we got." I focused my will, and the interface materialized in my vision, glowing with a soft blue hue against the darkness of the room. Plunder queue, processing. Processing 11 Tier 5 subjects. Soup neutralized, Subject 89 gelatinous physiology, power bone-free structure, convert. Soup neutralized, Subject 92 feathered vision, power avian ocular mutation, convert. Soup neutralized, Subject 104 minor acid secretion, power pH 4 skin secretion, convert. The list went on. 11 lives, 11 tragic mistakes of Vought science, and 11 tiny sparks of power snuffing out. None of them were worth retaining. "Convert all," I commanded. Converting 11 Tier 5 powers. Conversion complete, plus 1100 XP. Processing 7 Tier 4 subjects. Soup neutralized, Subject 44 stone skin, power dermal calcification, convert. Soup neutralized, Subject 51 thermal regulation, power nitrogen manipulation self, convert. Soup neutralized, Subject 67 elasticity, power stretching limited, convert. My Tier 1 durability and cryokinesis already far outstripped anything these poor souls possessed. Convert all. Converting 7 Tier 4 powers. Conversion complete, plus 3500 XP. Processing 3 Tier 3 subjects. Soup neutralized, Subject 12 iron regenerator. Power, regeneration Tier 3, metallic dermis Tier 3, convert. My regeneration is Tier 1, my super defense is Tier 1, useless. Convert. Soup neutralized, Subject 19 telekinetic. Power telekinesis Tier 3, convert. I already have Tier 3 telekinesis. Convert. Soup neutralized, Subject 22 reactor. Power radioactive emission Tier 3, convert. Walking Chernobyl, no thanks. Convert. Converting 3 Tier 3 powers. Conversion complete, plus 4500 XP. The notifications cleared, replaced by the summary screen. The numbers rolled up, a satisfying tally of destruction. Harvest complete. XP GAIND. Tier 5 conversions, 1100 XP. Tier 4 conversions, 3500 XP. Tier 3 conversions, 4500 XP. Total gain, 9100 XP. Previous balance, 1000 XP. Current total XP, 10,100. I sat back, letting out a long breath. System, I said, my voice steady. Open the upgrade interface. You got it, boss. We are shopping in the luxury aisle today. What's on the menu? We've got defense, we've got offense, we've got utility. But if I may make a suggestion, You're strong enough to throw a tank and you're tough enough to eat a missile. But you're still moving like a Prius in a Formula 1 race compared to the big guy. Speed, I agreed. My super speed was tier 2. It was impressive. I could dodge bullets, move faster than the eye could track in bursts. But Homelander? He moved at velocities that defied physics. Upgrade super speed to tier 1, I ordered. Excellent choice. Speed kills, baby, initiating upgrade. Power selected, super speed tier 2. Upgrade to tier 1 requires 5,000 XP. Current XP, 10,100. Do you wish to proceed? Confirm. Deducting 5,000 XP. Upgrade in progress. The sensation hit me instantly. It felt like my nervous system was being stripped out and replaced with fiber optics. The world around me seemed to lurch. The hum of the servers dropped in pitch, slowing to a rhythmic thrum. I watched a speck of dust floating in the air. It stopped moving. I stood up. I moved my hand. To my eyes, it looked normal. But the wind generated by the movement blew a stack of papers off my desk as if a gale had struck. Upgrade complete. Power evolved. Super speed tier 2, right arrow super speed tier 1. Capabilities. Reflexes enhanced to light speed processing. Movement speed capable of reaching Mach 30. Atmospheric friction generated by movement is nullified by a secondary durability field, part of the system optimization. I took a deep breath. My perception of time had shifted. I looked at the coffee cup on my desk. I reached out, grabbed it, took a sip, and set it down. To a normal observer, the coffee level would have just dropped instantly. Next, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears until I adjusted my perception back to normal time. The teleportation range. 1 kilometer is good for tactical insertions, but for strategic movement, it's limiting. Agreed, hopping 1 km at a time to get across the state is tedious. Let's stretch those legs. Upgrade teleportation to tier 2. Power selected, teleportation tier 3. Upgrade to tier 2 requires 3,000 XP. Current XP, 5,100. Do you wish to proceed? Confirm. Deducting 3,000 XP. Upgrade in progress. This sensation was mental. It felt like the map in my head was unfolding, the fog of war pushing back. My spatial awareness expanded violently. Upgrade complete. Teleportation is now tier 2. Range increased to 10 kilometers. Line of sight requirement removed for known locations. Mental anchor stability increased. 10 kilometers. I could cross the entire city in 2 jumps. I could infiltrate almost any facility from a safe distance. I have 2,100 XP remaining, I noted. Plenty for a mid-tier polish, the system said. What's the play? I looked at my list. Telepathy. It was currently tier 4, acquired from Mesmer. Upgrade telepathy, I commanded. Power selected, telepathy tier 4. Upgrade to tier 3 requires 1,500 XP. Current XP, 2,100. Do you wish to proceed? Confirm. Deducting 1,500 XP. Upgrade in progress. The headache was instant but fleeting, like a camera flash going off behind my eyes. Then, the noise started. I could hear Marcus in the hallway, thinking about the security rotation. I could hear Kimiko in her room, an abstract stream of images and colors rather than words. Upgrade complete. Telepathy is now tier 3. Range increased to 100 meters. Mind control suggestion capabilities significantly improved. You can now influence actions and erase short-term memories. I rubbed my temples as the influx of data settled. I dialed down the sensitivity, silencing the voices of my staff until they were just a background murmur. Status, I said. Final status. Current XP, 600. Powers. Cryokinesis, tier 1. Regeneration, tier 1. Super strength, tier 1. Super defense, tier 1. Super speed, tier 1, upgraded. Teleportation, tier 2, upgraded. Super stamina, tier 2. Enhanced senses, tier 2. Fire manipulation, tier 3. Telekinesis, tier 3. Shapeshifting, tier 3. Size alteration, tier 3. Telepathy, tier 3, upgraded. Cloning, tier 4. I looked at the list. It was beautiful. Physically, I was now in the same weight class as the gods of this world. And with the Tier 2 teleportation and Tier 3 telepathy, I had utility options that they couldn't even dream of. I stood up, the movement a blur of speed that didn't even disturb the air. I walked to the window, looking out at the city. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 40 Chapter 40, Black Swan 1. The bedside clock read 3:12 a.m. The room was silent, save for the low hum of the central air conditioning. Stan Edgar slept as he lived, perfectly still, entirely composed and without a wasted movement. He slept like the sleep of a man whose conscience had been surgically removed decades ago in the name of efficiency. The vibration of the phone on the mahogany nightstand was a subtle intrusion, but to a man of Edgar's discipline, it was a siren. He opened his eyes. He transitioned from sleep to wakefulness in a single second. He reached out, his hand steady in the darkness, and picked up the secure device. The screen displayed a single name, Graves. Edgar tapped the green icon and brought the phone to his ear. "Speak," Edgar said, his voice a gravelly baritone, untouched by sleep. Sir Graves's voice was strained like the sound of a man watching a disaster unfold in real time. "Project Odessa. It's gone." Edgar lay in the dark for a moment, processing the words. "Gone," Edgar repeated, his tone devoid of inflection. "Clarify." "Burned, sir. The entire facility. Sublevels 1 through 4 are an inferno. There are no survivors. And the monitoring station went dark 12 minutes ago." Edgar sat up, placing his feet on the cool hardwood floor. "I will be at the tower in 20 minutes. Have the situation room prepped. And Graves." "Yes, sir." "Use the new eyes. I want to see everything." "Already online, sir." Edgar ended the call. He stood and walked to his closet. He was dressed in a charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, and a black tie. He tied the knot by feel, pulling it tight against his collar. The drive to Vought Tower was a blur of empty streets and yellow streetlights. Edgar sat in the back of his town car, his hands folded in his lap, watching the city pass by. When he arrived at the tower, the lobby was empty, a cavern of glass and steel echoing with silence. He bypassed the main elevators and took the private lift directly to the sub-basement levels, far below the public face of the 7. The doors opened onto the intelligence division. Usually, this room was a hive of activity, analysts monitoring social media trends and crime rates. Tonight, it was cleared out. Only Graves and 2 senior technicians remained, standing before the massive wall of monitors. On the main screen, a satellite feed showed a thermal image of a forest in Pennsylvania. A bright white blotch dominated the center of the screen, the heat signature of the fire consuming Project Odessa. "Report," Edgar said, walking to the center of the room. Graves turned. He looked pale, dark circles under his eyes. "The local fire department has been blocked by our perimeter teams, but the smoke column will be visible for miles at dawn." "The cause?" "Hostile action," Graves said. "We have the footage. Or rather, we have what the cameras couldn't see." Graves gestured to a technician. "Bring up the Argus feed. Rewind to 200 hours." Argus, Edgar noted. Spencer's satellite grid. "Yes, sir," Graves said. "We integrated the feed 3 hours ago, just in time." The main screen shifted. The thermal view changed, the resolution becoming terrifyingly crisp. It showed a bird's eye view of the facility before the fire. Here, Graves pointed, 5 thermal signatures. They appeared at the main gate out of thin air. Edgar saw the 5 blobs of heat appear. He saw the heat signatures of the 2 Vought guards in the booth dim and slump instantly. "Telepathy," Edgar murmured, "or a sonic weapon." "Telepathy," Graves corrected. "Watch the movement." The video played out. Edgar watched as one of the thermal figures approached the massive steel gate. He saw the figure place hands on the metal. The thermal flared white at the point of contact, the heat of extreme friction and kinetic energy transfer. The gate buckled and slid open. "Superhuman strength," Edgar analyzed. "Keep watching, sir. This is where the Spencer technology pays for itself." The figures moved into the courtyard. They were wearing heavy armor. Standard optical cameras would have seen nothing but black shapes. But the Argus satellite was equipped with multi-spectral imaging, capable of penetrating density layers to map the heat patterns of the biological forms beneath the ceramic plating. Isolate and enhance, Graves ordered. Peel back the armor. The digital image stripped away the outer layers of the tactical suits, revealing the thermal maps of the faces underneath. The resolution was imperfect, but the biometric facial structure was unmistakable. Run against the global defense database, Graves commanded. Processing bars flashed on the side screens. Facial geometry, bone structure, thermal vascular patterns. Match found. 5 profiles popped up on the right-hand screen. 5 military ID photos. Edgar stepped closer, his eyes scanning the data. Name, Miller John. Rank, Sergeant. Unit, 4th Special Forces Group, Airborne. Status, active duty. Name, Banks David. Rank, Corporal. Unit, 4th Special Forces Group, Airborne. Status, active duty. Name, Kovacs Peter. Rank, Lieutenant. Unit, 4th Special Forces Group, Airborne. Status, active duty. Name, Davis Michael. Rank, Private First Class. Unit, 4th Special Forces Group, Airborne. Status, active duty. Name, Chen Wei. Rank, Specialist. Unit, 4th Special Forces Group, Airborne. Status, active duty. The 4th group, Edgar said softly. General Radek's personal wetwork team. It gets worse, sir, Graves said. The video continued. The 5 figures moved down the ramp. They encountered a squad of Vought security. Lieutenant Kovacs stepped forward. The thermal display showed the temperature in the tunnel drop instantly. The heat signatures of the Vought guards turned blue-black on the screen. Cryokinesis, Edgar said. The assault team moved deeper. The figure identified as Specialist Chen vanished from the thermal view, his mass shrinking to a pinpoint of intense heat that moved at bullet speed. Size alteration, Graves confirmed. That's our shrinking assassin. And then, the figures gathered in a circle, holding hands. The thermal signatures winked out of existence and reappeared instantly inside the secure lab. Teleportation, Edgar noted. The massacre inside the lab was efficient, brutal, and fast. Edgar watched as Sergeant Miller tore through the reinforced doors. He watched Kovacs freeze the staff. He watched Davis simply walk past armed guards who turned their weapons on themselves. Telepathy, Edgar added. Within 10 minutes, the entire facility was dead. The heat signatures of the patients in the stasis wing were snuffed out one by one. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 41, Chapter 41, Black Swan 2, bonus chapter. They liquidated our assets, Graves said, his voice trembling slightly. Massacre every test subject. And look. On the screen, the figures were moving equipment. Expensive machinery vanished into thin air as they touched it. Where is it going? Edgar asked. Unknown, Graves said. It just disappears. Spatial pocket, teleportation cache, we don't know, but they stripped the lab bare. The video ended with the thermal bloom of the thermite charge, washing out the screen in white. Edgar turned away from the screen, walking slowly to the window that looked out over the dark city. He clasped his hands behind his back. General Radek, Edgar said, the name tasting like ash. A man who has publicly decried the use of SUPs in the military for years. A man who lobbies for traditional kinetic warfare. It appears his public stance was a diversion, Graves suggested. It appears so, Edgar agreed. He turned back to the screen, looking at the 5 faces of the soldiers. Look at them, Graves, Edgar said, his voice carrying a strange note. Sir, look at how they move, Edgar said, gesturing to the frozen image of the team breaching the gate. He pointed to Sergeant Miller, a brute who opens doors, not a hero who poses for photos. He pointed to Corporal Banks, a transport system, not a celebrity. He pointed to Lieutenant Kovacs, a weapon of mass destruction who follows orders. This lineup, Edgar said, his eyes gleaming in the blue light. It is better than the 7. Graves stayed silent, knowing better than to interrupt. The 7, Edgar continued. his voice dripping with disdain, are children, drug addicts, and narcissists. Homelander is a mood swing away from lasering a city block. A train is a junkie. Deep is an idiot. They are products, yes, but they are defective products. They require constant management and constant cleanup. He looked at the 5 soldiers on the screen. But these men, these are soldiers, and their powers complement each other perfectly. The telepath neutralizes the threat, the cryokinetic alters the battlefield, the teleporter provides mobility, the brute provides force, and the shrinker provides infiltration. It is a perfect tactical unit, a combined arms approach to superhuman warfare. They wiped out a black site in 10 minutes, Graves whispered, without a single casualty. Exactly, Edgar said. This is what I have been trying to sell to the Pentagon for decades, and it seems General Radek has beaten me to it. Edgar walked back to the desk and sat down. The admiration faded into the cold calculus of business. How, Edgar asked. Sir, how do 5 active duty soldiers in the United States Army possess such stable superhuman abilities? Edgar asked. Graves tapped a command into his tablet, bringing up a secondary window on the main monitor. Our technicians just completed a forced entry into the Department of Defense's classified personnel archives. Look at these files, sir. These are the team's medical records from their last deployment. 6 months ago, Sergeant Miller and his men were baseline humans. They must have been injected with Compound V very recently. Obviously, Edgar snapped. But Compound V is not something you brew in a bathtub, Graves. It is the most complex chemical formula on Earth. It kills adults more often than it empowers them. To create a team like this, 5 successes in a row with stable powers, that requires the refined formula. The stabilized version we were developing at Sage Grove. But there is a clear progression in their capabilities, sir, Graves noted, tapping a finger against the tablet to highlight the chronological data. The violence we witnessed at the soup party and the signatures left at Sage Grove were consistent with high-output physical force, telepathic suppression, and extreme cryokinetic energy. Our leading hypothesis is that they developed a slightly less refined version of the serum through an initial leak, allowing them to field their primary hitters. However, once they successfully hit Sage Grove and secured Cardossa's stabilized formula, along with the complete research data, they clearly perfected the integration. That is how they managed to manifest the shrinking and teleportation capabilities we witnessed tonight. Correct, Edgar said. The room fell into a heavy silence. Edgar looked at his hands. Vought International is the sole manufacturer of Compound V. We control the supply chain from the raw materials to the final vial. And there is one strategic ingredient that is found in only one place in the world. A mine that we own. A refinement process that we patented. He looked up at Graves, his eyes cold as liquid nitrogen. No one else can make V, Graves. It is physically impossible. You cannot reverse engineer the catalyst without the source. So, Graves swallowed hard, so they didn't make it. No, Edgar said, they didn't. They acquired it, Graves finished, from us. We have a leak, Edgar stated. A leak at the highest level of this company. Someone has been siphoning the stabilized V, someone has been supplying General Radek and his shadow program. Someone has handed the U.S. military the keys to our kingdom. Who, Graves asked. That, Edgar said, is the question. He stood up and walked to the wall of monitors. He looked at the face of Sergeant Miller again. This video, Edgar said, it never leaves this room. You will purge it from the Argus servers immediately after we are done. As far as the world is concerned, this footage never existed. Sir, but this is proof. We could go to the president, we could bury Radek. And admit that Vought has lost control of its proprietary technology? Edgar asked sharply. Admit that the U.S. military now has super soldiers that answer to them, not us. If this gets out, our stock price goes to zero. The moment the government realizes they don't need us to make sups, we are obsolete. So we keep it secret, Graves said. We keep it buried, Edgar corrected. We let Radek think he is unseen. We let him think his little red unit is a secret. Edgar turned to Graves. You will initiate a Tier 1 internal audit. I want every milligram of Compound V produced in the last 5 years accounted for. I want the financial records of every executive, every scientist and every board member scrutinized. You will find the traitor who gave Radek the formula. And when I find them, bring the name to me, I will handle the rest, Edgar said. He looked back at the screen one last time. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 42, Chapter 42, Phantom Platoon, 1. The Situation Room in the basement of the West Wing was a space designed to strip away the concept of time. There were no windows to show the sun rising over the Potomac. The air was recycled and kept at a constant 68 degrees. The only light came from the massive digital maps on the walls and the harsh fluorescence overhead that hummed with a low frequency. It was 4:15 a.m. The mood around the long mahogany table was less national crisis and more hostile negotiation. President Robert Dakota Bobsinger, not yet elected to the Oval Office in the public eye, but currently serving as the Secretary of Defense and acting as the President's proxy for superhuman affairs due to the incumbent's medical leave, sat at the head of the table. He rubbed his temples, his eyes bloodshot. A styrofoam cup of lukewarm coffee sat untouched in front of him. To his right sat General Francis Ironhead Higgins, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was a man carved from granite, his uniform immaculate despite the hour, though his jaw was set in a line of irritation that threatened to crack his molars. To his left was Director Rayner of the CIA, looking disheveled and frantic, clutching a tablet like a shield. And standing at the far end of the room, looking like the only person who actually wanted to be there, was Grace Mallory. Grace, Singer rumbled, his voice a gravelly rasp. You have exactly 3 minutes to convince me that dragging the Joint Chiefs and the director of the CIA out of bed before the birds are even awake was not a fireable offense. And since you're retired, I mean fireable in the sense that I have you fired out of a cannon. Mallory placed a thick file folder on the table. It landed with a dull thud that echoed in the silent room. You're not sleeping, Bob, Mallory said, her voice sharp. Not with what's happening in New York and Pennsylvania. The fire at the psych ward? General Higgins grunted, crossing his massive arms. State police ruled it an electrical fault. Why is this a federal issue? Because it wasn't an electrical fault, Mallory stated. And the 16 dead bodies at the Gilded Lily Hotel weren't a drug overdose. And the crater that used to be a research facility in the Pennsylvania woods wasn't a gas leak. She opened the folder. She slid 3 high-resolution photographs across the polished table. The first showed the interior of the Gilded Lily suite, leaked from a police source before Vought clamped down. It showed the bodies. The second showed the half-melted remains of the Sage Grove main gate, the steel warped by impossible cold and force. The third was a satellite image of the Project Odessa site. The thermal residue, even hours later, was blindingly white. Gentlemen, Mallory said, we are looking at a shadow war, and Vought isn't the one winning it. Director Rayner picked up the photo of the Gilded Lily. We've heard the chatter, Grace. The Z-drug. Vaught's already spinning it. It's a lie, Mallory snapped. I have contacts in the coroner's office who saw the bodies before Vaught's cleaners arrived. They were neutralized instantly. All of them. She pointed to the Sage Grove photo. And this was a tactical demolition. The facility was stripped of assets and then burned with thermite to destroy the evidence. General Higgins leaned forward, picking up the photo of the Odessa site. He squinted at the blast pattern on the gate. He traced the line of entry with a calloused finger. Breach and clear, Higgins muttered. Look at the spacing of the takedowns on the perimeter guards. 2 distinct drop points. Simultaneous engagement. The guards didn't even unholster their sidearms. He looked up at Mallory, a strange glint in his eye. Who hit this facility, Grace? We don't know, Mallory admitted. But look at the pattern. High-value Vought targets. 0 civilian casualties. And 0 collateral damage to non-Vought infrastructure. Whoever did this infiltrated a high-security hotel, a black site asylum, and a hidden research bunker. They went in, they killed every soup and Vought contractor inside, and they vanished without leaving a single trace of DNA or digital footprint. Singer sat up straighter, the fog of sleep clearing from his eyes. You're saying it's a team. It has to be, Mallory said. The coordination required to pull off the Gilded Lily hit alone looping the security feeds, neutralizing the targets, planting the cover story. That's a squad-level operation. 5, maybe 6 highly specialized operatives. And the discipline, General Higgins added, his voice dropping to a low rumble of appreciation. He tapped the photo of the gilded lily again. Look at the positioning of the bodies. The targets were identified, isolated and terminated with extreme prejudice. This was a professional hit squad. Do you think it's a Vought rival? Rayner suggested. Maybe a foreign state actor, the Russians. No, Higgins shook his head firmly. Foreign actors want credit or they screw it up. This, he gestured to the destruction of Project Odessa. This smells like American doctrine. Overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. The thermite charges, the lack of forensics, that's the Army Field Manual, Chapter 5. That's Ranger School. That's Delta. The room went silent. The implication hung in the cold air. Are you suggesting, Singer asked slowly, that we have an active Special Forces unit operating on domestic soil, targeting a private corporation without my knowledge? No, sir, Higgins said, his tone shifting to one of professional certainty. A domestic strike of this magnitude would require a specific set of authorizations that haven't crossed my desk. If a tactical hit were operating in that sector, I would be the one holding the leash. Every unit capable of this is either in their barracks or on a scheduled deployment. These operatives are completely off the grid. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 43, Chapter 43. Phantom Platoon 2, bonus chapter. Then who are they? Singer demanded. Mallory leaned on the table, looking each man in the eye. What if they aren't active duty? Higgins frowned. Mercenaries. Retired patriots, Mallory corrected. Or disavowed. Men who spent their lives fighting for this country, only to come home and see a corporation like Vought turning our national defense into a reality TV show. Men who know the danger SUPs pose because they've seen the collateral damage up close. She gestured to the photos. Think about it. Who else has the training to breach a black site undetected? Who else has the discipline to kill 16 super-powered beings without losing a single man? Who else has the moral code to ensure not a single civilian bystander was harmed in 3 separate high-intensity engagements? Higgins stared at the photo of the destroyed gate. A slow nod traveled around the table. It made sense. It fit the profile. Old warhorses, Higgins murmured. Guys who didn't like being put out to pasture. Maybe a team that served together. Gulf War, early Afghanistan. And they're targeting Vought, Rayner said, her eyes widening. They're doing the job we can't do because of the red tape. They're vigilantes, Singer said, but his voice lacked the usual condemnation. Highly trained and incredibly dangerous vigilantes. They're winning, Mallory said, and Vought is scared. I have intercepts from the tower. Edgar is locking down everything. They don't know who they're fighting. They think it's a massive conspiracy. They don't realize it's likely just a fire team of pissed-off veterans. The general let out a short laughter. It was a humorless sound, but there was a distinct note of pride in it. Goddamn. If that's true, if it really is just a handful of our boys taking Vought to the cleaners, you almost have to admire the balls on them. Admiring them is one thing, General, Singer said, his politician's mask slipping back into place. Allowing a rogue paramilitary unit to conduct domestic warfare is another. If Vought finds out these are former military, they will spin this into a coup. They'll say the government is attacking them. It could start a civil war. Vought doesn't know yet, Mallory said, but we have an opportunity here. To do what? Rayner asked. Arrest them. To use them, Mallory said. Singer raised an eyebrow. Explain. We are fighting a losing battle against Vought's military bill, Mallory stated. This team, this Phantom Platoon, or whatever they are getting into places we can't. They are finding things we can't. They stripped Sage Grove clean. That means they have Vought's dirty laundry. If we can get that evidence, Singer mused. Exactly, Mallory said. But we can't just knock on their door. We don't know who they are. And more importantly, we can't let Vought know we're looking for them. Vought has ears everywhere. Half your staff is probably on their payroll, Bob. If we make a move, if we try to track them through official channels, Vought will intercept it. They'll find the team and kill them before we ever make contact. So we can't talk to them, Higgins said. Not directly, Mallory said, but we can leave a door open. A signal, Rayner realized. Yes, Mallory corrected. We know their pattern. They hit Vought's soft underbelly, labs, holding facilities, and places where Vought hides their mistakes. We can predict their next target. How? Singer asked. Because I have the same list of black sites that they seem to be working off of, Mallory lied smoothly. She didn't, not really, but she knew how to play the game. There's a Vought logistics hub in Jersey. Low security and high traffic of sensitive materials. It fits their profile perfectly. We leave a package at that site. A package, Higgins asked. A secure drive, Mallory explained, encrypted with a CIA handshake code, something only a professional would recognize. We leave it in a place they're guaranteed to find if they toss the place. Inside the drive, we put a single text file, a secure, one-way line. You want to open a chat room with a death squad, Singer summarized dryly. I want to offer an exchange, Mallory said. They give us the evidence, we give them targets. We point them at the places Vought actually cares about. We make them our weapon. The room fell silent again. General Higgins looked at the photo of the destroyed research lab. He saw soldiers doing what soldiers did best, destroying the enemy. I say we do it, Higgins said, his voice firm. If these are our boys, they're fighting the good fight. They're doing the job we're too tied up to do. Hell, I'd buy them a beer if I could. General, Singer warned. I'm just saying, sir, Higgins shrugged. Better they take orders from us than run wild. Director Rayner nodded slowly. If we get that evidence first, we can stop the military bill. Singer rubbed his face with both hands, looking older than his years. He looked at the photos of the dead sups. He thought about the polls, the pressure, and the terrifying power of Homelander. Fine, Singer said, but this stays off the books. If this blows up, Mallory, I never authorized it. You're acting as a rogue agent. I'll deny you to the press, to Congress, and to God himself. I wouldn't expect anything else, Bob, Mallory said, a thin smile touching her lips. Do it, Singer ordered. Reach out to these retired soldiers. But be careful, Grace. If they're as good as you say they are, they might not want to be found. And if they're not, Vought is going to eat them alive. They burned down a fortress and ghosted an entire security grid, Higgins grunted, tapping the table. Vought's the one who should be worried. These guys are professionals. Mallory closed the folder. I'll handle it. She turned and walked out of the Situation Room, her heels clicking on the tile floor. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 44, Chapter 44, Breakfast. The morning light filtered through the sheer curtains of the master bedroom, painting the room in soft hues of gold and gray. I opened my eyes. I sat up, the silk sheets pooling around my waist. The penthouse was quiet, save for the low hum of the building's internal systems, a sound only my enhanced hearing could pick up. I swung my legs out of bed and walked to the bathroom. A quick shower, the water scalding hot, scrubbed away the last vestiges of the previous night's surveillance. I dressed simply for the morning, a pair of comfortable joggers and a fitted t-shirt. I walked out into the hallway, expecting the usual silence. Usually, Kimiko would be in her room or sitting quietly by the window, waiting for me to initiate the day. But today, the air was different. It carried a scent. I paused, inhaling deeply. It was rich, savory, and complex. Dashi stock, soy sauce, the sweet tang of mirin, and something else, grilled fish. I walked towards the kitchen, my footsteps silent on the marble floor. When I rounded the corner, I stopped. Kimiko was standing at the massive kitchen island, a place I had usually occupied. She was wearing the oversized gray hoodie I had given her, but she had tied the sleeves back with hair ties to keep them out of the way. She was moving with a rhythmic intensity, a knife flashing in her hand. Kimiko, I asked, my voice soft so as not to startle her. I spoke in Japanese. Good morning. She spun around, the knife held loosely in her hand. For a split second, the old instinct flared in her eyes, the soldier assessing a threat. But it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by an almost proud spark. She pointed at the stove, then at me, and then made a gesture I recognized from the night before. She mimed eating, then gave a thumbs up. Is there something good today? I asked, walking closer, leaning against the counter. You are diligent, cooking this early in the morning. She smiled, a real thing that softened the sharp angles of her face. She put the knife down and picked up the remote for the small kitchen TV. She turned it on, navigating the menu with surprising familiarity until she found a saved clip. It was a Japanese drama. A scene showed a family sitting around a low table, laughing and eating a steaming hot pot. The steam rose in clouds, the actors exaggerating their enjoyment. She pointed at the TV, then at the pot simmering on my stove. She made a gesture over her own chest, mimicking the apron the mother in the show was wearing. Ah, I said, nodding. You wanted to try the recipe from the show. She nodded vigorously. She pointed to a pile of vegetables she had already prepped, carrots cut into perfect flowers, shiitake mushrooms with decorative crosses sliced into the caps, and negi onions chopped with laser precision. You need a sous chef? I asked, rolling up my sleeves. She considered this, looking me up and down. Then she picked up a second knife and slid a block of tofu toward me. She made a chopping motion, then indicated the size with her fingers. Small cubes. Understood, chef, I said. The kitchen felt alive. I cubed the tofu, careful to match her specifications. She was handling the meat, slicing thin strips of pork with a concentration that would have put a surgeon to shame. I watched her hands. They were weapons, capable of tearing a man apart. But right now, they were gentle. She arranged the vegetables in the heavy iron pot with an artist's eye, creating a color wheel of orange, green, and brown. She poured the broth over it, the liquid hissing as it hit the hot metal. She picked up a ladle, dipped it into the broth, and blew on it gently. She walked over to me and held it up to my lips. I leaned forward and tasted it. It was rich, salty, and sweet, the flavors perfectly balanced. It tasted like comfort. Perfect, I said. Her eyes lit up. She turned back to the stove, adding a final splash of soy sauce with a flourish she had definitely copied from the TV show. We carried the pot to the dining table, setting it on a trivet in the center. We sat next to each other in the middle of the long table. She served me first. She ladled a generous portion of pork, tofu, and vegetables into my bowl, then poured the broth over it. She placed the bowl in front of me with two hands, a gesture of formality that touched me. Itadakimasu, I said, clasping my hands. She watched me take the first bite. The pork melted in my mouth. The vegetables retained a perfect crunch. This is amazing, I said honestly. The mushrooms are cooked perfectly. She beamed. She served herself a bowl and began to eat, her movements quick and efficient. We ate our way through the pot. I commented on every ingredient. The tofu soaked up the flavor well, I noted. She nodded, pointing to the broth. Yes, the stock is strong, good depth. She picked up a carrot flower with her chopsticks and held it up, admiring her own handiwork before popping it into her mouth. As we finished, my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at the screen. It was a calendar reminder. Quarterly strategy review, 10:00 a.m. I sighed, the spell breaking. I wiped my mouth with a napkin. Kimiko, I said, this was wonderful, thank you. She looked at me, sensing the change in my tone. I have to go to the company today, I explained. I have a board meeting. She tilted her head. She pointed at the TV, then at herself. Yes, I said, you stay here, watch your dramas. Practice your drawing, I will be back this afternoon. She nodded, accepting the routine. She stood up and began to clear the table, her movements efficient. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 45, chapter 45, Boardroom 1, bonus chapter. I walked to the secure line in the hallway and pressed the intercom. Marcus. Sir, Marcus's voice came back instantly. Prepare the car, I'm going into the office. Spencer Industries HQ, sir. Yes, it's time I checked in on the family business. Understood, convoy ready in 10 minutes. I went to my room to change. I selected a suit that was more aggressive than my usual attire. A midnight blue cut that looked almost black in the dim light. I checked my appearance in the mirror. Arian Spencer stared back, handsome, wealthy, and untouchable. The arrival at Spencer Industries headquarters was an event. The building was a glass spire in Midtown, less ostentatious than Vought Tower, but radiating a more dangerous kind of power. My convoy pulled up to the curb, and security personnel swarmed to clear a path. Employees in the lobby stopped and stared as I walked through the glass doors, flanked by Marcus and 3 other guards. Whispers rippled through the atrium. "Is that him? He never comes in. I heard he was sick. I heard he was buying an island." I ignored them, my face a mask of polite indifference. I swiped my keycard at the private elevator bank, and the doors slid open instantly. "Top floor," I said to Marcus. "You wait outside the boardroom." "Yes, sir. We'll sweep it before you enter." When the doors opened on the executive floor, the atmosphere changed. It was quiet here, the air heavy with the scent of money and stress. The boardroom was at the end of the hall. It was a secure facility, a SCIF, sensitive compartmented information facility, designed to be impervious to bugs, lasers, and electronic eavesdropping. Inside, 5 people were waiting. They stood as I entered. These were the stewards of my empire, the people my parents had trusted to run the machine while I played the playboy. Jonathan Sterling, the CFO, a thin man with eyes like a calculator. Elias Kincaid, the COO, a former logistics general with a neck as thick as a bull's. Victoria Voss, the head of legal, a woman who could smile while cutting your throat with a contract. Dr. Eris Thorne, the director of R&D, no relation to Marcus, a brilliant scientist. Richard Halloway, the director of internal affairs, the man who knew where all the bodies were buried. "Mr. Spencer," Sterling said, extending a hand, "this is a surprise. We weren't expecting you until the quarterly review next month." I found myself with some free time, I said, shaking his hand. "Please, sit." They sat around the long table. The room was soundproofed, the walls lined with acoustic paneling. So Kincaid rumbled, "To what do we owe the pleasure? New directives for the Vought contract." "Something like that," I said, taking the seat at the head of the table. I leaned back, letting my gaze drift slowly from face to face. In the deep recesses of my mind, the inherited memories of the original Arian Spencer began to thrum with a familiar dread. Arian Spencer had spent 5 years sitting in this very chair, looking at these same 5 practiced smiles and feeling a cold knot of suspicion tighten in his gut every time the word accident was uttered. He had suspected them, every single one of them, from the moment the wreckage was cleared, but he'd been a powerless boy with no proof and no way to fight back. He had been a puppet, living a life of quiet desperation while they pulled the strings. But that boy was gone, and I was no longer interested in playing along. "I've been thinking about the past," I said softly, "about the crash." The air in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. They exchanged subtle glances, micro-expressions that a normal human would have missed. A tightening of the lips from Voss, a blink from Sterling, a shift in posture from Halloway. "A tragedy," Voss said smoothly. "Your parents were visionaries. We miss them every day." "Do you?" I asked. I activated telepathy, Tier 3. The lack of electronic noise in the room made their minds stand out like beacons in the dark. I pushed past the walls of their professional personas and into the chaotic stream of their thoughts. It was a cacophony of greed, fear, and arrogance. "Sterling, why is he here? Does he know about the Cayman accounts? If he audits the slush fund, I'm dead." Kincaid, kid looks softer than his old man. Should have pushed for the hostile takeover last year. Voss, keep talking, keep smiling. He's just a figurehead. He doesn't know anything. I pushed deeper. I focused on the specific memory I had mentioned. And then I saw it. It was a shared secret, a rod at the core of the table. I saw flashes from 5 different perspectives. Halloway organizing the sabotage of the private jet's hydraulics. Sterling authorizing the payoff to the ground crew. Kincaid arranging the cover up with the FAA. Voss drafting the updated wills that gave the board emergency powers. Thorne ensuring the black box was damaged beyond recovery. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The parents of this body, James and a leaner Spencer, had been executed by the very people sitting in this room, smiling at me, drinking my water. They had killed them to seize control of the company, to turn Spencer Industries into their own personal piggy bank while keeping me as a clueless puppet. A white-hot rage ignited in my chest. It wasn't my anger, was Arian's. It was the memory of the man I had replaced, screaming for justice. I stopped smiling. Why? I asked. My voice was low, barely a whisper, but it carried across the table like a gunshot. Excuse me, Sterling asked, his smile faltering. Why did you kill them? I asked, looking directly into Sterling's eyes. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. Arian, Voss said, her voice taking on a soothing tone, I think you're confused. The crash was an accident. The NTSB report was conclusive. I'm not talking about the report, I cut her off. I'm talking about the hydraulics. I'm talking about the payoff to the mechanic in Teterboro. I'm talking about the meeting you five had at Kincaid's estate 3 days before the flight, where you toasted to new management. Their faces went white. The blood drained from them as if I had pulled a plug. How? Holloway stammered. How could you possibly? How do I know? I stood up slowly. Kincaid stood up, his face flushing red. This is insane. I don't know who you've been talking to, boy, but these are slanderous accusations. I'm calling security. He reached for the panic button under the table. I flicked my wrist. Telekinesis Tier 3. The heavy oak chair Kincaid was standing in front of flew backward and smashed into the wall. Kincaid was lifted off his feet, an invisible hand grabbing him by the throat and slamming him against the acoustic paneling. He hung there, feet dangling, clawing at the empty air. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 46, chapter 46, Boardroom 2. Sit, down, I commanded. The other 4 froze. Their minds were screaming now, he's a soup. He's one of them. How didn't we know? Oh God, he's going to kill us. Sterling scrambled for the door. Help, security. I looked at the heavy steel door. I visualized the locking mechanism fusing. Cryokinesis Tier 1. Frost exploded across the doorframe. The metal groaned and warped as the temperature dropped to absolute zero in a split second, welding the door shut with ice stronger than steel. Sterling pounded on it, screaming, but the sound was swallowed by the soundproofing. No one is coming, I said. It's just us. I walked around the table. Voss was weeping silently. Thorne was shaking, staring at his hands. I stopped in front of Sterling, who was cowering by the frozen door. Please, Sterling begged, we can fix this, the money. We can give it back, all of it, just let us go. The money, I laughed, a cold sound. You think I care about the money? I have billions, you took my parents. I closed my eyes. Cloning Tier 4. The air shimmered. 5 figures materialized around the room. 5 identical Aryans, dressed in the same midnight blue suit. They looked at the terrified board members with identical expressions of disgust. Grab them, I ordered. The clones moved. Clone 1 grabbed Sterling. Clone 2 pulled Kincaid off the wall. Clone 3 grabbed Voss. Clone 4 took Thorne. Clone 5 grabbed Holloway. The board members struggled, but they were soft men and women fighting against super strength. It was no contest. I walked to Sterling. I placed my hand on his forehead. Telepathy Tier 3. I dove into his memories, bypassing the fear and the panic, and went straight for the data. I downloaded everything. His bank passwords, the encryption keys for the slush funds, the names of the corrupt politicians he bribed, his signature, his voice, his mannerisms, the way he liked his coffee. It was a brutal process. Sterling screamed as I tore through his psyche, stripping him of his identity. I moved to the next, Kincaid, then Voss, then Thorne, then Holloway. One by one, I harvested their secrets, their knowledge, their essence. When I was done, they were slumped in the grip of my clones, drooling, their eyes vacant. I turned to my clones. I projected the memories I had stolen into their minds, sharing the data via our psychic link. You know what to do, I said. The clones nodded. Clone 1's face began to shift. His bones cracked and reshaped. His hair thinned and grayed. In seconds, Jonathan Sterling stood before me. Clone 2 became Kincaid. Clone 3 became Voss. Clone 4 became Thorne. Clone 5 became Holloway. I looked at them. The board of directors was now, quite literally, me. Transfer the funds I ordered. Every cent they stole. Move it back into the company accounts. Then, initiate a purge. Use their memories. Find every traitor, every leak, every person in this company who has ever sold us out. ruin them, or mark them for the red unit. Understood, the Sterling clone said, his voice a perfect mimicry of the original. Now, I said, looking at the 5 drooling originals. Dispose of the trash in the basement of this building, below the parking levels. The clones grabbed their counterparts. Pop. Clone 1 vanished with Sterling. Pop, 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 pop. The room was empty. I stood alone in the silence. Spencer Industries was now truly mine, from the top down. The entire corporate machine was now an extension of my will. A few seconds later, the air shimmered. Pop. The 5 clones returned. They were adjusting their ties, smoothing their suits. They looked exactly like the people they had just buried alive. It is done, the Sterling clone said. They are sealed in the old concrete service tunnel. Oxygen will last, maybe 3 hours. Good, I said. Take your seats. The clones sat down at the table. They opened the folders. They picked up the pens. I stood in the center of the room, surrounded by my new board of directors. The air was still thick with the smell of ozone and the lingering chill of the ice. Before we open those doors, I said, looking at the Sterling clone, let's see how our neighbors at the tower are handling the morning news. With a soft pop of displaced air, Sterling clone vanished from the boardroom. Less than 3 seconds later, he reappeared, holding my custom-built tactical terminal from my private office. He placed the obsidian black laptop on the mahogany table and stepped back. I sat at the head of the table, my fingers dancing across the keys with the fluid grace of my hacking mastery. The screen flickered to life, displaying a top-down view of the Vought intelligence room. I saw Graves standing before the monitors, his face pale. And there, standing by the window with his back to the room, was Stan Edgar. Look at them, Graves, Edgar's voice echoed through the speaker. Look at how they move. No wasted movement. No grandstanding. This lineup, it is better than the 7. These are soldiers. Their powers complement each other perfectly. I watched the screen as Edgar pointed to the thermal images of my clones, the red unit. He was analyzing them like a scholar, his voice filled with a disturbing sort of professional admiration. I saw him zoom in on the thermal maps of the faces my clones had stolen. He's taking the bait, I whispered, a slow grin spreading across my face. We have a leak, Edgar's voice dropped to a whisper on the monitor. Someone at the highest level of this company has been siphoning the stabilized V. Someone handed the U.S. military the keys to our kingdom. You will find the traitor who gave Radek the formula. I tapped a key, freezing the frame on Edgar's reflection in the glass. He looked like a man who had finally found a worthy opponent, and he was looking in exactly the wrong direction. I stood up, the chair sliding back silently on the rug. I looked at my board members. Keep the Vought contracts flowing. I want Spencer Industries to be the only hand Edgar can reach for when he finally realizes he's drowning. Understood, sir, the 5 clones replied in a chilling harmony. I walked to the frozen door. I placed my hand on the ice. Cryokinesis. I withdrew the cold. The ice sublimated into mist, vanishing instantly. The door was unlocked. I opened it. Marcus was standing there, alert. Sir, he asked, looking past me at the board members who were all sitting calmly, reviewing documents. Everything all right? We heard. Shouting. Just a heated debate about fiscal policy, Marcus, I said, stepping out into the hall. We've reached a consensus. The board is fully aligned with my vision now. I glanced back. The 5 clones looked up and nodded at me in unison. Let's go home, Marcus, I said, buttoning my jacket. I promised someone I'd be back for the afternoon. As I walked to the elevator, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. P.S. Sorry guys for the late update. I was out of town because our department organized a rural medical outreach, so I had to go with my team to nearby villages to provide free health checkups and basic healthcare services. That's why I couldn't update on time. Thanks for your patience. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 47, Chapter 47, A Letter to a God, bonus chapter. The interior of the armored SUV was a cocoon of silence, insulated from the chaos of mid-morning Manhattan by 2 inches of bulletproof glass and layers of sound-dampening steel. The air conditioning hummed a low note. keeping the temperature at a precise 68 degrees. I sat in the rear passenger seat, my legs crossed, a tablet resting on my knee. On the screen, a live feed from a local news affiliate in Dayton, Ohio played in high definition. The camera was focused on a stage erected in a town square. A crowd of thousands cheered, their faces flushed with adoration. And there, standing center stage, bathing in the worship like a lizard on a sun-warmed rock, was Homelander. He was smiling. It was that perfect smile that had been market-tested to poll well with every demographic from toddlers to grandmothers. He waved, his cape rippling dramatically in a wind machine that had been set up just off camera. "You are the real heroes," Homelander said into the microphone, his voice dripping with humble sincerity. "I just fly around. You guys, you teachers, you nurses, you parents, you're the ones holding this country together." The crowd roared. A woman in the front row looked like she was about to faint. I watched his eyes. They were blue and completely dead. Behind the smile, behind the rehearsed patriotism, there was nothing but a bottomless void of seeking attention. "Pathetic," I whispered, the word lost in the quiet of the car. "Sir?" Marcus asked from the driver's seat, his eyes flickering to the rearview mirror. "Nothing, Marcus," I said, not looking up, just commenting on the weather in Ohio. The convoy slowed. The light inside the car shifted, darkening as a massive shadow fell over us. I looked out the side window. We were passing the Vought Tower. The black monolith rose into the sky, blocking out the sun. It was a fortress of secrets, a monument to corporate greed built on a foundation of human experimentation. Inside that building, Stan Edgar was currently orchestrating a shadow war against a phantom army he believed was led by the U.S. military. And Homelander? Homelander was in Ohio, smiling for the cameras, completely oblivious to the fact that his father, Stan Edgar, was terrified. An idea sparked in my mind. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket and pulled out a small notepad and a fountain pen. I clicked the cap off the pen. I closed my eyes for a second, diving into the deep ocean of memories I had harvested from the board members of Spencer Industries. I sifted through the stolen life of Jonathan Sterling, the former CFO. I bypassed the memories of his family, his affairs, his golf handicap, and drilled down into the darkness. I found the meetings, the hushed conversations in back rooms, the transfers of funds to black sites, the names of the men who had sanctioned the murder of my parents to keep the war machine greased. I opened my eyes and began to write. My hand moved with fluid strokes. Senator Mitchell, chairman of the Defense Appropriations Committee. Congressman Halloway, Armed Services Subcommittee. General Raddick, U.S. Army, 4th Special Forces Group. I listed them, the men who had taken bribes, the men who had looked the other way when Spencer Industries sabotaged competitors, the men who were currently in bed with Raddick. Then, I wrote down the names of the 5 soldiers whose identities my clones had stolen for the Odessa raid. The men who didn't exist as SUPs, but whose faces were currently burned into Stan Edgar's mind as the Red Unit. Sergeant John Miller, Corporal David Banks, Lieutenant Peter Kovacs, Private Michael Davis, Specialist Wei Chen. I looked at the list. It was a mixture of truth and lies, a C***L designed to be lethal. I added a note at the bottom, scrawling it in a fan-boyish hand that disguised my own precise penmanship. Homelander. They are working with the military to replace you. They have made all these soldiers into SUPs. Stan Edgar knows everything about them, but he is letting it happen. Don't let them take your spot. You are the only god we need. Your biggest fan. A loyal Vought employee. I capped the pen. I read the note one last time. It was perfect. I stored the pen and tea paper in the dimensional pocket of my inventory. I unlocked my tablet. I opened a terminal window, the black screen reflecting my eyes. My fingers flew across the virtual keyboard. I initiated a query to the Argus satellite grid. I had given Vought read-only access to the feed, but I retained the admin privileges. I typed in the command to display the current orbital trajectory of the KH-12 keyhole satellite tasked with monitoring the eastern seaboard. The data scrolled down the screen. Orbital inclination, 98 degrees. Current position, 40, 7,128 degrees N, 74, 0060 degrees W. It was currently tracking a thermal anomaly in the Atlantic, likely a submarine drill. The optical sensors were pointed away from Manhattan. The blind spot over the city would last for exactly 4 minutes. Perfect. I minimized the Argus window and opened a new connection. I targeted the Vought Tower internal network. I navigated through the digital architecture of the tower. I bypassed the personnel files, the financial records, and the R&D logs. I went straight for the security feeds. Tower level 99, conference room A. This was the room where the 7 held their meetings. The room with the long table and the Vought logo on the wall. The feed popped up on my screen. The room was empty. The lights were dimmed, casting long shadows across the polished table. The chairs were pushed in. I studied the image. I burned it into my mind. I memorized the distance from the door to the head of the table. I memorized the texture of the carpet, the position of the water pitchers, the specific angle of the chair at the head of the table, the chair with the eagle wings carved into the leather. Homelander's chair. I closed the laptop. I unbuckled my seatbelt. I shifted in the seat, leaning back into the shadowed corner of the cabin where the tinted glass was darkest. I focused on my own mass. Size alteration, Tier 3. The sensation was a rapid compression. The leather seat rose up around me like a cliff face. The ceiling of the car shot upwards, becoming a distant sky of gray fabric. In the blink of an eye, I was a dense speck, barely an inch tall, standing on the vast expanse of the leather upholstery. The hum of the engine, previously a quiet purr, was now a vibrating roar that shook the ground beneath my feet. I closed my eyes. I recalled the image of the conference room. I visualized the space above the eagle-winged chair. I felt the connection to the location, the spatial coordinates locking into place in my mind. Teleportation, Tier 2. The world snapped. One moment, I was surrounded by the smell of leather and the vibration of a moving vehicle. The next, silence, absolute silence. I opened my eyes. I was standing on the armrest of a massive leather chair. To my right, the table stretched out like an endless mahogany plane. The air smelled of lemon, polish, and ozone. I was in Vought Tower. I looked around. The room was exactly as it had been on the screen. I reached into my inventory. I held the edge of the paper. I hopped from the armrest down onto the seat of the chair. I laid the paper down carefully in the center of the leather cushion. It looked like a white carpet spread across the seat. I made sure it was visible. I made sure the name Homelander was facing up. I took a step back, surveying my work. It was a small object in a large room, but its impact would be nuclear. When Homelander walked in for the next meeting, he wouldn't be able to miss it. I closed my eyes again. I visualized the interior of the SUV, the texture of the leather seat, the smell of Marcus's cologne, the vibration of the engine. Teleportation. Snap. The silence of the boardroom vanished, replaced instantly by the low roar of the car. I was back on the seat, a tiny speck in the darkness. I released the hold on my mass. Size alteration. The world rushed inwards. The ceiling lowered, the seat shrank. In a second, I was fully grown, sitting comfortably in the back of the car, my suit jacket barely ruffled. I buckled my seatbelt. "Marcus," I said, my voice calm. "Sir." "Turn up the radio. I like this song." "Yes, sir." The music filled the car. I smiled, enjoying the ride. The car turned a corner, leaving the shadow of Vought Tower behind. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 48, Chapter 48, Homelander 1. The sun had set hours ago, leaving the Vought Tower as a pillar of shadow against the glowing skyline of New York. Homelander landed on the balcony of the 99th floor. He took a deep breath, smelling the lemon polish and the recycled air. He walked down the corridor. He stopped in front of a door, Madeline Stillwell. He looked through the wood, through the drywall. The office was empty. He looked down through the floor into the private nursery. The crib was empty. She was gone home. She was with her son, her real son. He blinked, the world returning to color. He turned away, the cape snapping behind him. He walked down the hall to conference room A, the meeting room for the 7. He pushed the double doors open. The room was empty, the long table reflecting the city lights. He walked toward the head of the table, his chair, the one with the eagle wings. He reached out to pull it back. He stopped. There was something on the leather seat, a piece of white paper. Homelander narrowed his eyes. He scanned the room. He listened for a heartbeat. Nothing. He looked back at the chair. He reached out and picked up the paper. He unfolded it. It was a list, names. Senator Mitchell, chairman of the Defense Appropriations Committee. Congressman Holloway, Armed Services Subcommittee. General Radek, U.S. Army, 4th Special Forces Group. He recognized the names. Radek was a loudmouth general who hated SUPs. Below them, another list. Sergeant John Miller. Corporal David Banks. Lieutenant Peter Kovacs. Private Michael Davis. Specialist Wei Chen. He didn't know these names. Nobodies. He read the message scrawled below. Homelander. They are working with the military to replace you. They have made all these soldiers into SUPs. Stan Edgar knows everything about them, but he is letting it happen. Don't let them take your spot. You are the only god we need. Your biggest fan. A loyal Vought employee. Homelander read the last line again. You are the only god we need. A slow smile touched his lips. He ran his thumb over the ink. At least someone knows, he whispered. Then his eyes drifted back up to the middle of the page. Stan Edgar knows everything about them, but he is letting it happen. The smile vanished. The paper crinkled in his grip as his hand tightened into a fist. The heat began to build behind his eyes, a red glow casting long shadows across the table. Edgar knew. He turned around. He moved with a purpose that terrified the very air in the room. Stan Edgar was reviewing the initial audit reports from the Compound V inventory. The double doors to his office exploded inward. They were ripped from the frame, the wood splintering and crashing against the far wall. Edgar slowly closed the folder in front of him and looked up. Homelander stood in the doorway. His eyes were burning red. His chest was heaving. Is it true? Homelander demanded, his voice a low vibration that shook the water in the pitcher on Edgar's desk. Is what true, John? Edgar asked, his voice calm. Homelander walked into the room, kicking a piece of the shattered door aside. General Radek, is it true that his men are killing SUPs? Did they destroy our property? Edgar paused. His mind raced, connecting the dots. How does he know? The Odessa footage was locked down. Only Graves knew. Unless Homelander has an informant. Edgar had suspected it. Homelander had ears in the building. Someone in security, or perhaps a lower-level analyst trying to curry favor with the 7, had leaked the intel. If Homelander knew about Radek, he likely knew about the Red Unit. Denying it would be pointless. Yes, Edgar said simply, it appears so. Homelander's face twisted. He had expected a lie. He had expected a denial. But the confirmation meant the rest of the letter was true. You knew, Homelander hissed. He stepped closer to the desk, looming over Edgar. You knew they were building an army. We confirmed it only recently, Edgar corrected. It is an ongoing investigation. Investigation? Homelander shouted. They are replacing us. They are making soldiers into SUPs. And you're sitting here reading reports. I am handling a corporate crisis, Edgar said. I am ensuring that Vought remains standing. You're not handling anything. Homelander leaned down, his face inches from Edgar's. You're letting them do it. Why didn't you tell me? Because it is a delicate situation, Edgar said, not blinking. How did you come by this information, John? I have my sources, Homelander snarled. I have people who actually care about this company, unlike you. He straightened up, looking toward the window. I know who he is. General Radek, I know where he is. John, Edgar said, his tone sharpening. I'm going to pay him a visit, Homelander said, a cruel light entering his eyes. I'm going to find his little soldiers, and I'm going to tear them apart. No, Edgar said. Homelander looked back at him. Excuse me. You will do no such thing, Edgar said. General Radek is a high-ranking officer in the United States Army. He attacked us. If you kill him, Edgar said, his voice dropping to a whisper. You are not a hero. You are a villain. You are a monster attacking the American military. I don't care. You do care, Edgar said. He stood up. Think about the polls, John. Think about the people. If you attack the army, the media will turn on you. The merchandise will stop selling. The movie deals will be canceled. The crowds will stop cheering. Homelander flinched. Is that what you want? Edgar asked relentlessly, to be hated. Homelander's eyes dimmed. The red glow faded. He looked away. He's making replacements, Homelander muttered. He is trying to replicate our success, Edgar lied smoothly. He thinks he can build a better product. He is wrong. You are unique. But if you kill him now, you make him a martyr. You start a war we cannot win in the court of public opinion. So we just let him get away with it. No, Edgar said. We play the game, we gather evidence, we expose him, we ruin him, and we do this quietly. Edgar walked around the desk. He stopped in front of Homelander. Let me handle the general, Edgar said. You focus on the speech tomorrow. Homelander looked at Edgar. He hated him. He hated the calm, the control, but he knew Edgar was right about the polls. Fine, Homelander said. Handle it. He walked to the balcony. But Stan. Yes. Homelander turned back. If I find out you're lying, if I find out you're helping them. He turned, his eyes flashing red for just a second. I won't care about the polls anymore. I'll burn it all down, starting with this office. He stepped out onto the balcony and launched himself into the air. Boom! The sonic boom rattled the glass. Edgar watched him go. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. 49, chapter 49, Homelander 2. The wind at 30,000 feet was a freezing torrent, but Homelander didn't feel it. To him, the atmosphere was as insubstantial as a cobweb. He hung suspended in the black void between the city lights below and the stars above, his cape snapping violently in the slipstream. His chest heaved from a rage so pure and hot it felt like he had swallowed a star. Stan Edgar. The name was a poison in his mind. The old man sat in his office, adjusting his glasses, speaking in that condescending baritone, treating the most powerful being on the planet like a misbehaving child. You are the image, Edgar had said. Homelander's hands curled into fists, the leather of his gloves creaking under the strain. He wanted to laser the tower in half. He wanted to hear Edgar scream just once, just to prove that the old man was made of meat and bone like everyone else. But he couldn't. Edgar was right. The polls, the adoration, the love of the crowd. It was the only thing that filled the hollow ache inside him, the only thing that made the silence bearable. He couldn't touch General Radek, not yet. But the rage needed an outlet. It was a physical pressure building behind his eyes, demanding release. He looked down at the sprawling grid of New York City, millions of tiny lights representing millions of tiny lives. He reached into his belt and pulled out the crumpled piece of paper note. The wind threatened to tear it from his grip, but he held it fast. He smoothed it out against his palm, his eyes scanning the list of names again. General Radek, untouchable. But there were others. Senator Mitchell, chairman of the Defense Appropriations Committee. Congressman Halloway, Armed Services Subcommittee. Edgar had said not to touch the general. He hadn't said a word about the politicians. Homelander's lips curled into a cruel smile. The heat behind his eyes began to simmer, a red warning light. He banked left, diving toward the city. The sonic boom trailed behind him, a thunderclap that would wake half the boroughs, a reminder to the insects below that a god was passing overhead. The Crime Analytics Division on the 40th floor of Vought Tower was usually a quiet place at night. A skeleton crew of 3 analysts sat in the semi-darkness, monitoring police scanners and social media feeds, drinking stale coffee. The locking mechanism glowed cherry red, then liquefied, dripping onto the carpet. The doors swung inward with a groan of heated metal. Homelander stepped through the ruin. His eyes were glowing faintly, casting long shadows across the room. The 3 analysts froze. One dropped his coffee mug. It shattered on the floor, the sound like a gunshot in the terrifying silence. You, Homelander said, pointing a gloved finger at the senior analyst. a balding man named Stevens who looked like he was about to have a coronary event. "Why, yes, sir," Stevens stammered, scrambling to stand up, knocking his chair over in the process. "I need locations," Homelander said, his voice deceptively soft. He walked closer, the heat radiating from him making the air shimmer. "Senator Mitchell and Congressman Holloway, current whereabouts." "Sir, we aren't authorized to track government officials without a warrant or a direct order from Mr. Edgar," Stevens whispered, his voice trembling. Homelander tilted his head, looking at Stevens with a mixture of curiosity and disgust. "Authorized?" Homelander repeated the word as if it were in a foreign language. He stepped into Stevens' personal space. He could hear the man's heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Thump, thump, thump, thump." "I am the authorization," Homelander whispered. He leaned down, his face inches from the analyst's. "Do you know what I can do, Stevens? I can see the blood pumping through your veins. I can burn this entire floor to ash before you can blink." His eyes flared brighter, the red light bathing Stevens' sweating face. "Now, do you really want to talk to me about paperwork?" "No, sir," Stevens squeaked. He spun around to his console, his fingers shaking so badly he mistyped the password twice. "Searching now." The other two analysts were frozen in their seats, staring at their screens, terrified to even breathe too loudly. "Got it," Stevens said, his voice cracking. "Senator Mitchell, his primary residence in the city, the Tribeca Spire. Penthouse B, his security detail signed off shift at 2300 hours. And Holloway? He's at his estate in Greenwich, the manor on North Street." Homelander smiled. It was a terrifying expression that didn't reach his eyes. He reached out and patted Stevens on the cheek. The leather glove felt cold. "See," Homelander said, "that wasn't so hard. You're a true patriot, Stevens." He walked to the shattered doors, stepped onto the balcony, and launched himself into the night sky. The Tribeca Spire was a needle of glass rising above the fashionable district. Senator Mitchell lived well. Homelander hovered outside the building, 50 stories up. The wind whipped his hair, but he remained perfectly still, a statue suspended in gravity. He scanned the building. He found the penthouse. He focused his vision. The walls of the building faded away, becoming transparent layers of steel and concrete. He scanned the interior. No security guards inside the unit. No cameras pointing at the balcony, just a sleeping man in a silk-sheeted bed. Senator Mitchell was fat. Even in sleep, his breathing was a rattling snore. His heart was encased in layers of visceral fat, pumping sluggishly. Homelander drifted closer. He hovered outside the bedroom window. The window was cracked open a few inches to let in the cool night air. He focused on the man's chest. He narrowed his eyes. He aimed his laser with surgical precision, bypassing the skin, the muscle, the ribcage. He aimed directly at the heart. Inside Senator Mitchell's chest, the blood inside the ventricles began to heat up. The pressure inside the heart began to spike. The steady thump-thump of the senator's pulse became erratic. Thump, 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 thump. Goal, 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. Library, add to your library for updates. All right, legends, that's it for today. If you're ready for the next chapter, smash that like button and flood the comments right now. Remember, we've got 3 days to prove this story needs to continue. Subscribe so you don't miss the drop, and I'll meet you in the next audiobook.